All right. Move that back. Very sensitive microphones. I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. I think I'm just going to keep going farther back. This is as far away as I can get. Can everybody still hear me? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do that. And if I keep going this way, maybe it'll. I just want to thank everybody coming out this morning. We are part of the Missouri House, basically special committee. So we call it Interim Committee. And it's a special committee basically on the question of broadband development across the state of Missouri. So Bishop's a member of the committee. I'm chairing. Bill's here in support. He's also a member of policy development. So he wears more than one hat in the General Assembly. What we're trying to do is go around the state and take testimony, basically evidence from folks all over the state, because every corner of the state is different. We have different needs. We're going to do this in Ava tomorrow, which has completely different needs from Springfield. So we're trying to get as much stakeholder engagement as we possibly can get. That includes folks from government, obviously, providers, folks out there in the community who have difficulties. We had a really fun meeting at Perryville, Missouri here about a week ago, where folks just started naming names, and it was really interesting to see the level of frustration among folks who basically had no access at all. And their mantra was, yeah, we'd love to have service that goes out once a month. We just don't have the service. So we run into these various issues all across the state. And what we're trying to do is do these town halls in three basic parts, and we try to do this as informally as possible. The first part is, where are we? The second part is, where do we need to be? Not want to be, need to be. It's the 21st century. Where are we coming up short? And the third part is, what action steps can we take in order to get there? So the first one of these held was June 11th in Palmyra in my district. We've held these before. This time we had a twist. The action step was we're going to put together a steering committee basically to make sure everybody's on time, on task. Our goal is universal access in our corner of the state, which does not have universal access by any shot. So that's something we've already met, already basically dealing with providers, dealing with time frames, and trying to basically create a process where we have stakeholder engagement all the time. At the end of this process, our committee, having gone around the state, having taken testimony in Jefferson City, will compile a report. As part of that report, we're asking stakeholders for anything that you have that would help us basically as policymakers and appropriators. That includes one-pagers, case studies, white papers, anything you have that touches our concerns, the need for broadband expansion, deployment, enhancement, whatever you want to call it. And that goes everything from lack of access to digital navigators to digital inclusion, things we have really not had a statewide conversation about to this point. We're having that conversation. We're trying basically to get all hands on deck, and because of all the federal funds that are flowing through here, thank you, Sonia, we are at that point where we have one chance really to get this right. We have a $250 million request in front of the House committee that runs in parallel to us that's dealing with federal funds. So the first round of those are ARPA funds. We have a good idea what those look like. We know the feds now are looking at recommended speeds of 100, best case, or worst case basically is 120. The state standard now is 25.3. So we're going to have to take a look at the state standard. I don't know what that looks like at this moment, but legislative, we're going to have to go in and adjust that. We know that. We also need to take a look at what we can do with our state fund. It shows a return on investment 7 to 1. For every investment dollar that it takes out, we get 7 back. The industry standard is 3.5 to 4. So our state fund is outperforming the state or the federal / industry standard by a factor almost 2 to 1. Which we want to encourage that. They offer grants as low as $25,000 for the real last mile access that we talk about so much and haven't accomplished yet. A couple other things we need to look at. Mapping is a mess. We know it's a mess. We know it's always been a mess. Census block methodology is flawed from the get-go. We know that. Encouraging at the federal level, seeing some movement away from census block toward more of a community standard, which we welcome that, but they're not there yet. Mapping, we have resources in state. Folks are already working on this at University of Missouri system. We'd love to be able to incorporate what they're doing into something at the statewide level. without having to reinvent the wheel, which is not high on anyone's list of things to do. So there are some exciting developments out there in this space that we want to encourage. There are also some challenges, and we all know what those are. Speed is a challenge all over the state. Access is a challenge all over the state. Affordability is a challenge all over the state. So at the end of the day, when we write a report, we will generate several policy recommendations, and we'll also have a proposed fiscal note as to how much we need to invest in the state, into the state fund. Basically, that's what we can do at the General Assembly level in order to move this process forward. So again, I want to thank you for coming out this morning. We look forward to hearing from each of you. I'm going to turn this over to Bishop, and he is our local member of the Broadband Committee. And just wanted to note that everybody on the committee has stepped up and agreed to host one of these town halls in their own backyards. So we've had incredible buy-in from folks who are part of this process, and we look forward to rolling this out across the entire state. So again, I want to say thank you for coming out this morning. Bishop.
Hi, if I haven't had a chance to meet you, my name is Bishop Davidson. As Representative Riggs or Chairman Riggs already mentioned, I have the privilege of being on this interim committee. I think they brought me on because I'm good at asking dumb questions, and so I'll be asking many of you questions today, I'm sure. And Representative Riggs and Owen, I'm sure, will ask the smart ones. Speaking of which, this hearing would not have been able to happen without Representative Owen, and so I'd like to thank him specifically, and also for the help of Commissioner Bob Dixon, who helped secure this location and bring a lot of folks together. We're looking forward to hearing from you as well. And we've got lots of folks on Zoom queued up there as well. As Representative Riggs said, this is a very informal process. It's going to be a back and forth questioning. If you do have any sort of documentation that you'd like to submit, you can do that now. I'll also be taking your emails as you introduce yourself, because I'd like to follow up after the fact. And if you'd rather submit it electronically, that works well too. And we'll be able to put that all together in the report by the end of the year. As far as beginning, I was trying to decide if we want to go with our folks online or oscillate back and forth. Is there any preference? No. With the committee? No. We haven't had issues with Zoom, right, before. I know technological issues. I kind of take it as it comes.
They need to unmute. Huh? They need to unmute on.
Yeah, when they speak. And I can't quite read the name. Is it Miss Chris Coulter? Is that right, Mr. Coulter?
He's the county administrative officer.
Yeah, I was trying to read the names from here. I don't know if they are ready on Zoom. And how we'll begin is just by introductions of. Yeah. Here, wait. I think we can see over here. Can anyone on Zoom hear us? And there's a few of you who are muted.
Yes.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Excellent. Okay, I see. It's oscillating through. So, well, if anyone on Zoom would like to begin our hearing, it'd probably be best if you unmuted yourself and introduced yourself. Anyone can begin. I'm not sure what they see. Right now, it looks like Jeff Berthold is on.
Yeah, I can go if you're ready.
Absolutely.
You can hear me fine, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. And I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Bertholdi, Director of SpringNet Broadband, owned by City Utilities, currently in charge of the fiber deployment to the city of Springfield and its kind of neighboring neighborhoods. Things are moving right along for our project. Costs certainly are a factor, as they are for everybody, and they seem to be getting higher every quarter. Materials and logistics are pushing materials prices and labor prices up. So that'll be it for us.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to do this already. So what are you looking at in terms of production delays, basically deployment, and what's your cost curve look like?
Right now, just in the last 12 months, we've seen on some materials, as everyone has heard, plastics have gone up for underground conduit about 20%. Luckily, city utilities was in a pre-order state on a lot of this stuff. So we had ordered a bulk and majority of the fiber itself, a bulk and the majority of the conduits. We held off for our very last portion of the project materials orders, so we didn't end up with a lot of excess on hand. So those are the pieces that are hitting us now. It's not significant to the overall project, but significant in the broadband landscape as we see it going forward. So for us, it's all the subdivisions that might be built in the next 3 years, 5 years, something like that. That short-term scope within the next 5 years, we see becoming very difficult to make financial marks to add these new subdivisions and these new developments that we see in the future. For what we've got started in the project, I think we're going to be, certainly fine. Project delays, to answer your question there, we are hearing about 18 months out on fiber orders. Again, we ordered early, so we're okay, but anyone that plans to order fiber now could be 18 to 20 months out. Conduits, about half that, I think.
Thank you. And then could you speak to the service area? Is it the same as the rest of CU service area that you guys are reaching out to?
90% of our current project is the city limits of Springfield. Then just beyond the city limit borders, where there's high density neighborhoods and residential, we've added that to the scope of the project as well. We can serve the utility footprint, which basically is Greene County and Christian County. But our project right now is just really focused on the city of Springfield and its immediate adjoining neighborhoods.
And would you mind elaborating on some of the services that are being, like the speeds and some of the technical parts of what's actually being brought to these homes? And then maybe even speak to the way you guys are measuring as well, if it's at all distinct from traditional census block measurements.
Sure. It is, I'll separate things for you and compartmentalize it a little bit. SpringNet, the utility service, is a legacy business and it's existed for over 20 years. We offer, as a product at SpringNet, symmetrical gigabit. That's 1 gigabit upstream, 1 gigabit downstream, and that's our entry-level service. We do offer services up to 100 gigabit speeds. That's a commercial product. Right, and we do direct internet access, and then we do layer 2 VLANs for metropolitan networks between, say, banks and their data center, for example. The new project, the fiber expansion project, is a utility lease model where we've built out a fiber network to approximately 115,000 addresses, give or take, and that fiber product is then leased to the service provider. In our case, it's Lumen, formerly CenturyLink. I can't speak specifically to the speeds that they're offering, but if you go to q.com/Springfield, you'll see that their $65 offering is basically a symmetrical gigabit. They say 940 meg. But that's what they're offering right now. The utility has no control over their service offerings whatsoever. We are just a dark fiber product that we lease to them.
Thank you. Any other questions from members up here? Okay. Thank you very much to Mr. Bertholdi. Appreciate it. And then, just for the record, can I get your email address, a good email that I can email you after this hearing?
Yes.
Or this town hall, rather.
Yeah, it's JBERTHOLDI@springnet.net.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And then I think we will oscillate sort of between the in-person and online. So if there's anyone in the room who would like to come before the town hall.
Yeah, are you in a time crunch? Yeah.
Yeah. And please let us know if there are particular time crunches. We actually have some folks coming in later in the committee as well.
I'm not sure if these are necessary, or can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gail Noggle. I'm the Executive Director for the Economic Development Alliance for Bolivar and Polk County. I'm a resident of Springfield and have been for many, many years, so I'm going to wear two hats here, one for the Springfield side and then also for Bolivar, Polk County. So as a economic developer in this area, and I have been doing this for about 17 or 18 years now, this particular community, Polk County and Bolivar, for starting into my 6th year, I believe it is. Prior to that, for Republic, and then also in between that span, some consulting work for other communities. So our role as an economic developer is to go into communities and help them with actually obtaining a higher degree and level of wealth, whether that's job creation, quality of life, and everything else that goes with what everybody else doesn't want to do. It's on economic development usually to proceed on that. One of the things that we do as professionals is recruit industry and manufacturing. And our recruiting efforts, primarily, we rely on large organizations such as the Department of Economic Development at a state level, who does business expansion and retention, and then organization Missouri Partnership, which is a professional organization that actually markets the state of Missouri for industry and manufacturing for the area. One of the things that is at the top of the list, obviously, is broadband. You don't even make it to the list. You probably don't even know of the opportunities that you miss if you don't have broadband available and the speed for efficiency's sake for these industries to come into the area. Although a lot of the city limits of Bolivar are well served, speed is always an issue. It's the rural area that is really, really a concern. This is nothing new. It is heightened by an exorbitant amount, obviously, during the pandemic. But I was just going through some of my old files, and I even have a study that was done back in 2017 by SIMCOG, Southwest Missouri Council of Governments. So some of the things that I was looking at are the same issues that we're talking about today, but tenfold. I'll use an example also as far as the industry recruiting at a state level and also a local level. I have two major projects that will bring probably 200 to 400 new jobs to the Polk County area if we are fortunate enough to work out all the details and actually win that project. One of the first things on their list, obviously, is how's your broadband? Do we have access? They would not be located within the city limits of Bolivar. They are in the county area, so it's very much of a need and a concern. In this particular case, I think we're working through those details, but it is a huge issue, and one that the states will suffer on if we don't have this broadband issue figured out, hammered out, and brought to the areas that's needed, which is pretty much all of the rural area across the state. One of the things that I see happening, and I think we all can see it firsthand, is through this pandemic with folks leaving their workplace where they had internet and officing at home. Huge concern. We're seeing the residential developments of our community asking those same questions before they're buying a house. So it's not just about the manufacturing or the industrial area that's a concern. It's residential as well. So the need is very much there. I'm a perfect example of I'm doing a hybrid type of job. I work out of my home in Springfield quite a bit, but I also travel to my home at City Hall in Bolivar. And if I didn't have that connectivity, that would not have been possible. And for those of us that are professional economic developers, we've had some heavy lifting to do this last year, as many have, helping to filter through the ARPA funds, the CARES Act funds, and navigating these programs for our small businesses. So, and large businesses as well, I should say. So the need for that is across the board. And again, the pandemic has just probably heightened that in a very large way. The school system as well, we hear about this, and this isn't anything new either, but if you can imagine pre-pandemic days of being able to go to McDonald's, the ag industry in the state of Missouri needing to get access to internet connectivity for obvious reasons to run their operation. But the school system, I'll go back to, pre-pandemic, it wasn't convenient to go to McDonald's, but at least they could go inside of McDonald's and get internet. Pandemic days, they're sitting in the parking lot because they couldn't go into the lobby area of McDonald's to get internet. So the concern has been here for several years with economic developers, and I'm just appreciative of the work that you all are doing to try to move this thing forward for our state.
If I could ask for a quick, we talk about desktop elimination, which are the ones they knock you out and you don't even know you're under consideration. What kind of feedback are you getting from, site selectors that you actually talk to as far as ability to attract business?
Unfortunately, you don't get to talk to a lot of the site selectors. You get bumped off without even knowing it. For the site selectors that I've worked with through the years, though, and I ask these kind of questions that I have a relationship with, they'll say that we have to not even include you on a long list if we go to your website and see that your speed of internet service is slow, minimal, or non-existent. He said, then you're going to be just knocked off right off the bat.
How do they define slow?
Ooh, I don't know if I can answer that right now. I would say, I'd be afraid to say. Yeah.
And that's one of the questions we really are struggling with. Is
Yeah,
how much is
I could
little?
I could research that for you with those that I have a relationship with, but for me to know what that would be right now, I'd be probably giving some misinformation.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that I was gonna offer some questions about speed as well, and sort of what speeds are felt like what's needed, because the numbers I feel like I've heard most often are something along the lines of it's always symmetrical and it's 100 megabytes. That tends to be
That's the term that I've
I've
heard as
come
well, but
around.
I really couldn't confirm that.
Yeah, and so then there's the anticipation of what may come in the future.
I had a provider in front of us, a co-op, that said that the record so far is 27 different devices in one household. Well, that's today. Tomorrow it'll be 50, and they're all soaking up bandwidth. So we know it's going to be a problem. We know 25.3 is obsolete. They knew it was obsolete when they put it in statute. We just didn't know how soon.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. You don't mind if I call you Gail, do you?
No, what else would you call me?
Well, Mrs. Noggle, but that seems real strange considering we grew up together. Gail, you've got about 5 small school districts in Polk County. And I know you kind of touched on this. I have had conversations with one of your superintendents up there that indicated to me that he finally just had to put a hotspot, available to the parking lot of the high school. Do you know what some of the other school districts in Polk County have done? I mean, obviously, Bolivar's a little different, and you mentioned McDonald's, but Fairplay doesn't have a McDonald's, and Halfway doesn't have a McDonald's, and Pleasant Hope doesn't have a McDonald's, and so on and so on.
Now they're going to want one.
Do you have any sense what some of the other districts did during this period to try and provide at least something where the students could at least drive to a parking lot and to be able to do their homework?
Well, it was my understanding, or is my understanding, that they did provide the devices for the hotspot and were able to get those out to the students. But as far as not having a McDonald's to go to, people were getting in the car and having to drive and get to a location where they could get internet, whether that's 15 miles, 20 miles, and in many cases that would have been.
I got those phone calls from parents. I don't know if you got them too, but yeah, they were not happy campers.
Yeah.
And you're still talking to this guy and you grew up with him.
Well,
But can we move on?
he's a good guy.
Ms. Noggle, can I have your email address to follow up with you?
It's G Noggle, that's Noggle at bolivar.mo.us.
Thank you. And I would like to follow up and see if you're able to talk with those site selectors. I'd
I'll
be
be happy
very
to do that.
interested to hear kind of what their, the private standard is
Okay.
at this point.
I'll be happy to do that and get that to you.
Thank you.
Well, we're doing the internet thing, email address, any reports, anything anybody has, they can send it to my house email account, lewis.riggs@house.mo.gov, or look me up on the House Representative website, just click on through. So what we plan to do is to take all of this and compile it into the report. So all the committee members will have access to this. Expect them all to read it and understand it, but also the general public will have access to this as well when we finish this process. So we thank you for your willingness to step up and get some definitions, but at the same time, what you're sending in will be used. It's not something we're going to put it on a shelf where we're actually looking at this as policymakers and appropriators. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll continue with a Zoom testimony for the town hall. Don't all rush at once. Let's see here. Why don't we just move? City. Their hands on? I don't. Are you all on the Zoom calls able to raise your hands within the program? You'd think I'd be more literate in Zoom.
I don't see anything like that. I see a chat window, but I don't see the typical
Okay,
raise your hand.
Well, I'm just going to choose one that I can read from Mr. Coulter. Would you care to speak with the committee or the town hall, rather? If no one from the Zoom chat would like to present, then I guess we'll go back to our live audience here. If there's anyone who would like to come and present before the town hall.
I'll get this out of the way.
Trying to avoid my...
Thank you. And I've given Representative Owen one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Bob Dixon, presiding commissioner here in Greene County. My colleagues are also in the audience, John Russell and Rusty McLaughlin. The report that I've handed you is a compilation, a final report that just came out in July from the National Association of Counties. And I served on that task force. And as a part of that, traveled most of the counties south and west of here in an effort to, and some north, it was an effort to try to get out and look at the footprint outside of our metropolitan area here. We also hosted a forum in Greene County. The problem here, once you get outside the city of Springfield, is really just like it is everywhere else. We have very limited capabilities, and there is a great deal of frustration toward a number of entities who have promised service, and I put government in that category as well because of the funds that have been spent, the terrible mapping. Mr. Chairman, you've referenced all of those things, but it was a real challenge to try to break this down into the 9 recommendations that make up the report. And I won't go through those because they're very simple and easy to read when you get time. But the essence, I would say, is seeing broadband as a utility rather than a luxury. And it's certainly been, as Gail said, it has been highlighted tremendously by the pandemic, whether it's schools, and I won't go through everything she said, but any of the professional uses of it. So this, I hope, will be helpful for you. There may be some controversy with a couple of the things legislatively. The thing that stands out to me is across the country, and by the way, there were 30 of us across the country that served on the panel, and the needs are different all over the nation, there's no doubt. But these 9 principles were consistent in every state and every county that participated. One of the things that may be controversial is there was a call to remove bans on local government from providing broadband service. I realize the nature of the arguments on why that would be in the statute, but when it comes to practicality, it just doesn't cut the mustard. And so that, I would be happy to answer any questions, but that's and I would say too that locally we are looking at the possibility of a study for what we can do here in Greene County with some of our municipalities, but we have not made any decisions on that.
Would you be able to speak to the nature of these local bans and then also the arguments in favor of keeping those in place?
Well, I think the reason they were put in place was to not compete with local business. The trouble is, in many cases, there's no local businesses. So it would be akin to, because this is really more of a utility than a luxury, it would be akin to not having government provide things like electricity if there was a situation where you didn't have any local providers. And that was some of the debate and the argument that was.
Was this something that your all's task force had come together more or less unanimously, or was that discussion still had within that group of
It was
county
unanimous,
associations?
but the discussion was pretty vibrant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask. In terms of the federal dollars coming down, looking through the county broadband solutions, see a lot of different mentions here. ARPA funds, allocations. I know CARES Act was basically a pain in the neck. It's like, oh, we got to get this out by the end of the calendar year, which for some folks was physically impossible. They relaxed their guidelines somewhat. ARPA, from what I can gather at this point, set a different views. You get your ducks in a row basically by 2024, get yourself fully deployed by 2026, which seems a lot more reasonable. But when we're talking 18-month delays and procurement and all the other things that go along with it, we're already into 2023. So it's 2024 is not that far away in terms of what we're doing in this space. From Greene County's perspective, is this something that you're looking at aggressive use of those ARPA funds or anything else that comes down the pike from the feds? We know there's some more that they're working through at the moment, infrastructure package. I think it was $100 million-ish for Missouri within that, particular to broadband. Is this something that you think is a viable option at this moment for Greene County to take those funds and basically provide those to folks out in the broadband space to deploy?
Well, I'll be careful to say we've made no decisions because we're still waiting on the final federal guidance. We have not made any decisions about what to do with our ARPA money. It is better than the situation we had with CARES because we had basically 6 months to get those funds spent before they extended the deadline. And we dealt with changing federal guidance throughout the entire time. With this, we've decided to wait until we have that final guidance, and there's 3 years to spend the dollars. So, but we are exploring what a study might look like if we were to choose to do one. We've had a number of discussions with various interested parties on a number of subjects, including broadband. But we've made no commitments or decisions.
And I'm aware of counties that have already moved aggressively in that space. And as I understand it, and Sonia can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way the guidance reads at this moment is that broadband is a priority.
It is actually mentioned in the bill.
That that should come before other things. And I know lots of folks talk, well, we're going to buy road graders, we're going to buy dump trucks, which is a depreciable asset, but they're not aggressively looking at broadband, which is investing in people. And from a local standpoint, I had one commission in my district that did this with CARES Act funds. They're going to do it again with ARPA. I'm hearing anecdotally from realtors around Northeast, where I'm from, $5,000 to $7,000 increase per parcel, fiber to the home. Mark Twain Lake is seeing folks fleeing St. Louis County, coming there to live all year round. Hearing that anecdotally from commissioners as far as sales tax. Lumber yards are happy because they're investing in properties that were formerly weekend, now they're permanent. And they get better internet in Rawls County, Missouri than they get in St. Louis County.
Well, and I found when I was doing these forums, I found, for example, Cassville, Missouri, which invested their co-op invested in infrastructure in 2002, and they put broadband wired to basically everybody in the town. It's the crown jewel of Cassville. There's no question about it. Berry County Electric did that work. It's definitely something that we're looking at, but again, we are not getting out ahead of the federal government a second time.
And I'm just going to ask you from a national perspective, and I got to talk with one of your colleagues during session from Kentucky. Were there any surprises that you found as you went around? I mean, we know what a lot of these issues are, but anything out there that just sort of jumped out and said, oh, wait a minute, we didn't see this as a problem before?
Yeah, and there were surprises. Some of those were the case studies that are in this report, and the chairman, who I believe is who you may be referring to when you visited Jefferson City, just did a fantastic job putting this task force together and making sure that they, the entire task force stayed on task. But I think the thing that stands out to me is there are all kinds of solutions being touted, including Starlink. But if you don't have fiber at some point in the transaction, none of it's going to work. Because fiber is the and this is just complete layman's speak here, but fiber is the backbone of any system that we try to put in.
The tie that binds.
Yeah. Appreciate your work and the committee. Thank you all for coming to Springfield.
Yeah,
Thank you for setting this up for us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report.
And Commissioner, do you like follow-up questions?
Sure.
Thank you.
Did you have another one?
No, but we will after we digest this report.
Bishop's got my email.
Yeah, I actually may have a. Could you elaborate a little more on this removing bans on municipal broadband? That I was trying to reconcile that with what we had heard earlier from CU. That's number 6, and I'm most curious about how its relevance to Missouri specifically, because I noticed the case study that they have here.
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak to Missouri.
Okay.
It was not something that I really focused on when I was in the legislature, but there are some states and jurisdictions who have just said, if you're in any type of government, you cannot operate broadband at all. Fortunately, we're not in that scenario here with city utilities doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
There were attempts to put bans on broadband that I'm aware of. But the essence of the argument for having those bans in place is, that you're not going to go out and compete against private business, which I agree with. But at the same time, if no one is doing it, it's kind of like banning the Tennessee Valley Authority and them not getting electricity to homes. So,
And I think we've discovered there's not an appropriate private incentive to see broadband brought out to rural areas, especially.
What I heard from the town halls that I did across this southern part of the state, where there's plenty of money being spent, but it's not being spent right. It's not actually getting out to, the providers may be getting the grants. They may be setting up the service, but it's not reliable. People can't get on the system. The maps don't reflect.
That comes back to metrics. That comes back to the measurement problem.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I was trying to reconcile, if we have any particular bands with the first testimony that we had heard.
Not that I'm aware of. There was an effort to put one on, which would have kept city utilities from doing what they're doing right now.
As a state, we have authorized, it's basically formation of broadband districts, municipalities to go together. We didn't do that for counties. Would that be something legislatively that you would recommend based on your experiences with these town halls? We've got a lot of gaps out there. And I've heard the same thing from folks about the providers. Promise, don't deliver, speeds aren't where they need to be. That's on the feds, unfortunately. From our state fund standpoint, we put something in statute last year that said if you don't do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it within 3 years, give the money back. Mm-hmm. So we have better accountability at the state level with the state fund and whatever the feds are doing this week. But what is your sense of that as far as willingness of counties to go in and basically say, hey, we know where these pockets are? The commissioners know.
I'd be keenly interested to see the details on that. Be something I'd like to take a look at. Yeah. Yep. Thanks again.
Thank you. I'm going to give an opportunity for the Zoom room to present testimony as well. We've got several folks online. If there's anyone who'd like to present before the town hall.
Who's the secret square?
Pardon?
Who's the secret square? I'm sorry, look at Hollywood Square.
Yeah. So I see EJ, Michael, Nathan, Mark, Chris. Anyone interested in presenting testimony at this time? Michelle. Okay. We'll come back to our live room. If there's anyone who'd like to present before the committee, we'd be happy, or the town hall, we'd be happy to hear your testimony. I'm going to double check. Can the Zoom room hear me still?
Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
Okay, I heard Jeff. Awesome.
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay.
Yes, she can be heard.
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay. I just gotta text. There we go. Is there anyone who's here to present testimony still? Are these eager observers? She said, I'm an eager observer.
So if we could just put you on the spot, what are you hearing at the federal level now? Wherever you're comfortable.
Well, as you know, they've been working on this infrastructure bill for several weeks. They've been on the Senate floor for the last several.
We can't hear.
Yeah, why don't you come up to a microphone, Sonia?
I guess I have to do the for the record thing.
Sure.
Okay, for the record, I'm Sonia Anderson with U.S. Senator Roy Blunt's office. And as your question was, they've been working several hours over the weekend over the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We are still waiting to see how it is exactly going to end up. There's been a lot of amendments being proposed. We are expecting a vote maybe later today or even tomorrow morning. So I'm still kind of going through to see what has been added and what actually stayed in. I guess you're probably aware how that system works. Sometimes the bill isn't exactly the way it was introduced. It is a large bill, 2,700 pages, but broadband is a large part of that discussion. We typically see now as broadband being a utility, and you're now being labeled as your traditional infrastructure, where traditional infrastructure used to be your roads and bridges, but broadband is pretty much a category as well. Right now, it looks like each state may get $100 million allocated towards broadband, but again, that's not final. We'll know more in a few days. If you have any questions in particular, I'll try to answer, but it is still a work in progress, a huge amount of work.
First, we wanted to say thank you to Senator Blunt for his absolutely tireless pursuit of federal dollars for this state. That starts with the CAF auctions back in the day up until the present time. So that's something, people don't know the rock stars out there. Roy Blunt's one of the rock stars, period, full stop. Did want to also ask if you're hearing anything as far as moving away from census block to community standard. It's in the guidance now that they're talking out loud. And we know when the feds say recommended, within a year or two, it's going to be a requirement. Are you hearing anything as far as what we can do with these funds that might be different from what happened before? We're still using census block.
Yeah, there's not a final guidance on that, so I do not feel comfortable speaking on the record of what that is going to look like. I know there's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion as far as the FCC maps. As you know, there's been a lot of controversy over that on what is actually high speed and what is not, and where is there actually broadband access. Even though a particular county may show that it has access according to the maps, when you're on the ground, that may not actually be the fact. But there's discussions at all aspects of broadband and getting that out to our constituents.
I don't think I have any follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have many interested parties.
We have providers.
Would you like to? I saw you raise your pin.
I'm Steve Campbell from NetVision. We're just a small wireless internet service provider. I mean, we do some stuff, fiber here in Springfield as well, but we're the guys that are trying to reach out to Winchester Gap and Dogwood out by Ava. We're the guys that are trying to get those people some type of internet access.
Yeah. Thank you for trying. I think that's the difficulty.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
What impediments are you running into as you try?
Us in particular is we work, it's wireless, so we deal with trees. It's the main thing that we deal with is just obstructions and getting it to them economically. We're also behind the curve on federal money and not really sure how to apply for that. Not sure where to go to figure out how to apply for that. So money is always an issue.
Have y'all taken advantage of the state fund at all?
No.
Yeah, actually, last town hall I was at, we had a similar question from somebody. I was like, I'm just not sure what to do. And I said, well, first thing is check with the state fund. And anybody who's not familiar with our state fund, something statute, we installed that in 2018, funded it in 2019, funded it again in 20 and 21. And it's a one-person shop. The director's named Tim Arbeiter through Department of Economic Development. And challenge process is really good. We hear that a lot. There's some funding in there. It's not a lot, unfortunately. But at the same time, we've also understood it's a one-person shop, so we basically spread him as thin as we can possibly get a human being spread.
I have talked to him before. Dallas County has done a couple broadband stakeholder meetings that we've tried to attend, and so we're working it, but it's a process to get it out to the people that we're trying to get it out to here. We're talking about Greene County is, struggling with 25 meg. I got people that can't get 1 meg, so.
Yeah. It also speaks, I think, to the challenge of just making sure we communicate all the resources that are available. That's going to be something that's ongoing, whether it's federal or local. And I was looking in this book, and that's one of your all's priorities too. I noticed establishing a national grants and loans clearinghouse. And I think you could apply the same to the state level as well. Trying to think, you had said the main impediments were mostly geographical, it sounds like.
A lot of geographical. I mean, to get a copper wire out to somebody out in Winchester Gap, it costs quite a bit of money. To get fiber out there, it costs quite a bit of money. Wireless isn't quite as expensive, but to get service to everybody in Winchester Gap, everybody's going to need a tower to get up above the trees to see a wireless signal, which again, is that going to meet your 100 meg? It's probably not going to meet your 100 meg standard.
Yeah. Could you speak to some of the, we've talked a lot about wireless versus fiber. Could you speak to some of the cost differences between them? You said it's a little cheaper. Could you maybe define that a little more? It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, so there's the unlicensed stuff, which you can set up a tower, an access point for an area for $3 to 10 grand to run fiber to each one of those people in the area is just, for instance, we're trying to get fiber to one of our towers. It's $65,000 to build that out just to get to the tower.
It's not even to the houses.
Right. So there is licensed wireless equipment that's more expensive that can do some of that we're talking about. But again, it's for us, it's just more economical for us to stick with the unlicensed stuff to try to get it out to folks. And as such, we deal with geographic trees, hills, stuff like that.
Yeah. And again, this can be a question to the room in general. Another sort of silly question. We always talk fiber, and I don't entirely know when fiber first came about and as being the kind of the standard bearer. Is there any sort of new technology on the horizon that we could ever see replacing fiber at this point in time? I'm sure things will change in time, but
nothing's going to replace fiber right now. No, or speed-wise.
Yeah,
bandwidth capability.
Okay. I told you I was the one who asked the silly questions.
No, it's a legitimate question. Disruptive technologies are something we're all aware of. And 10.1, 5 years ago was thought to be great. Well, now it's unserved. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions as far as the expense involved. Assuming you go ahead and you plow the $65,000 into whatever, what is your coverage area for that $65,000 investment?
Well, this goes back to the maps. I can reach 3 to 5 miles and get people decent speeds, 20, maybe even up to 50 meg. Again, though, that depends on how many trees. People like trees around their houses.
What would it take to get you to the point where if the feds come down and they say, well, from here on out, it's 100 symmetrical, what would it take you basically as an investor trying to deploy that? What is the cost structure you would be looking at in order to amp up your providers? Well, basically, how do you future-proof the process? You sink an investment into something and it gets you 20 or 50, and then all of a sudden it's obsolete. What does that look like in terms of investment down the road?
Well, if we were to try to future-proof anything, we're going to go fiber. That's the only way to future-proof our business. Right now, we're just trying to catch up.
From a statewide perspective, what would you like to see us do in order to help you get into these areas that frankly nobody else is going into?
We've talked about, you guys have talked about the mapping. The mapping is horrible. If we could get accurate mapping, the way we would know where to put where we would concentrate our efforts.
We're working on it.
Area. It's not going to be easy. I was speaking with Missouri State folks to get an accurate speed test off of somebody. There's just so many variables inside the house that you can't control, so you don't know if you're going to get an accurate test or not. So it's good luck.
I think you're coming out this morning. Did you have any questions for us?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'll make sure. Our Zoom room may have grown. Is there anyone in the Zoom room who'd like to present testimony in the town hall? Don't be shy. It's good for us to hear from a variety of perspectives, even if you may feel like you're saying something that's been said.
Good morning. This is Michelle Vondrasek. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. I appreciate listening in again to these town halls. They're giving me a good understanding of some of the challenges in the rural areas. Earlier, you had asked if there is any new technology out there. I have been working with the state of Missouri on a new technology called the Remote Universal Communication System that does allow us to connect to the back end of cellular, satellite, or fiber and extend that out to remote areas. Working with the local carriers and to their last stop, we have the ability to extend that out for miles. It is unique. It is one of a kind. And I am trying to get awareness out there. We have presented it to Tim. So we know that he is looking and considering this. It is a technology that's been classified as emerging by the DoD. You know that it can be funded. And it really is a technology that can take a connection, extend it under and through and over trees for half a mile to up to 6 miles on 5.0 hertz. So I would love to talk to the carriers that are local and work with them to extend where they don't have fiber to the areas that need some connection and get them connected within a matter of months and not years. So I'm very open. I will be in St. Louis's town hall meeting in person. I'm really trying to get this message out. We've been working with the Northeast Missouri State superintendents and have many letters of support. They've seen this technology, and we really can make an impact and get connection in a matter of months. If there's any questions or anybody would like to contact me, I can get my information out. But we're working very hard for the state of Missouri and getting those underserved areas connected, and we have found a solution.
Thank you very much. This is Bishop Davidson. I'm really curious about the emerging technology. What sort of, well, I guess to start with, where is this being most prominently applied? Where's sort of the case study? Where's the place that we should look if we're trying to?
We have it running in North Carolina and some very remote areas. We were able in 3 days to be able to set up a community of 27 mobile home community that was spread out about 30 miles from the school. We were able to find a very strong cellular connection and tie our RUCs into that and connect all of those students with 39 up speeds, very high speeds, within a matter of 3 days. It's still up and running. We also went up to Northeast Missouri, Clark and Lewis County and did a demonstration at Highland High School. Again, proving to them we connected to their fiber walked out as far as we could to see where we would lose signal, and they were tired of walking. We were well beyond half a mile before we decided to continue back.
And then what sort of speeds, and you may have said this and I just didn't quite catch it, what sort of speeds are you seeing in these areas or in North Carolina?
Well, to be honest, we're seeing the same speeds that they get at the last mile. So we can't improve the speed, but what we can do is extend it. So if it's a fast speed at the back haul, we extend that speed out. We have unique, think of access points on steroids that only lose about 2 to 5% degradation per hop. So we can put a big mesh network around a county and be able to have those students log in with a secure passcode to the school network with all the filters that the school would have.
I see. I understand now. Have you seen any, or has there been any sort of research to see if there's any limitation to that extension? I understand you're saying that you match the speed in which you're originating from and extending on. Do you ever find like this is the higher echelon? You can't really carry on. Question's making sense. If you had 100 megabyte speeds, for instance, as symmetrical service, are you able to extend that symmetrical service?
That is correct. I'm only extending the connection that I have. If it's 100, I can extend 100. If it's 25, I can only extend 25. I can't improve the network, but I can extend the signal to where it needs to go.
Do you consider this emerging technology to be a sort of an earlier short-term solution in some of these areas that are underserved to extend while we resolve the issues of getting actually faster speeds out to these locations?
I think it can be used as both. It's military grade. It was built for humanitarian reasons, or think of Doctors Without Borders who need communication, or after a natural disaster to get communication up. I think it's a great bridge between the time the carriers actually get there to extend to areas that have absolutely nothing, and work with the carriers on their roadmap, and us start at year 10 if they're at year 1, and start getting connection to the areas that they're not going to be there for many, many years. It can be a permanent solution if they realize that, in fact, this is a better solution and more cost efficient than running fiber to maybe a 27 home community. So we're looking at this as a bridge until fiber is there. We can help connect that fiber and keep it there permanently if they don't want to run it through aerial or underground. So it can be worked as both. It could be picked up and moved to another community if, in fact, the fiber ISP decides this is where we want to go now.
Ma'am, your project in North Carolina, what part of North Carolina? I mean, was this down like around Wilmington, or were we talking up around Asheville where it's, Smoky Mountains, much like the Ozarks would be?
Kingston, North Carolina is where we put this. And again, we had 30 mega download and 5 up, 30 down, 5 up. Some of the other areas that we were in were Bryson City, Robbinsville. We tried to do a proof of concept throughout the whole, in all areas.
So you hit multiple terrains then?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask, as far as, precision agriculture, you've talked basically about students. What about folks out there with new equipment? It's run on GPS, the telemetry now. is absolutely staggering. You've got folks out there, equipment providers now, who are actually hiring people to analyze the data streams that these tractors, combines, whatever, are spewing out every second. What success did you see with folks who were doing farming in these areas, if they were doing any farming at all, production agriculture?
We did not have any production or agriculture on there. However, we are looking at obviously leveraging this technology for telemedicine in tribal communities, and absolutely for the farmers. It's a wireless connection. So as long as they have the ability to connect, they can get to any application or to their machines, any of their IoT solutions on this network. It's literally just taking the network, instead of them having to go back and connect wherever they find connection, it's extending it to them in the farm.
And physically, what exactly is this? Is it, I mean, does it look like a tower? What's actually occurring when you go into North Carolina? What are you all doing?
Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. If we have the ability to do it, yeah, we do.
These are the two components that makes up the solution. This is the RUX, and we can connect this, plug this in anywhere. It holds everything. It's think of a network in a box. Got the power, the router, the Wi-Fi, and it can connect again to a cellular, fiber, satellite connection. And then we put these distribution modules in areas for it to send the signals throughout the town. These distribution modules can be connected by the students up to 1,000-mile radius. So this right here, and these are some of the areas that we did hit. But I'll show you right now. This is the Kingston, North Carolina location. Again, 25, 30 miles away from the school. Very spread out mobile home community. We put one RUX in this area and 4 distribution modules to spread out that signal. And we did this in less than 3 days. This is still up and running, and here are the strength testing that we did. It's incredibly impressive. Our company has been in indoor-outdoor Wi-Fi for over 15 years. Have never seen any technology like this. Again, independent liaison from the Department of Defense has come out to qualify it as an emerging technology. And here are some of the students in that community talking to their vice principal. And as you can see, many windows open, live streaming. And these are, again, and here are the test readings from that. But this is a community that had 0 internet. A lady in this community has, her job is to submit medical records, and she gets paid per record. Before the RUX was on, she was getting about 1 record per 1 record per 15 minutes. When we turned it on, she got about 4 or 5 done. So she more than quadrupled her income because she gets paid per record. I mean, so impactful. That's why we're trying to get this information out. It is new, but we're not promising you a gig, but we can at least get you connected until the fiber shows up.
And then what was your company?
Bond Technologies.
Bond Technologies. Do you have your contact info on a slide or that you'd be able to share?
Absolutely.
Slide deck itself.
Yeah. Follow up with you. If you, I'll follow up with you as well.
Thank you. And
You can send it to.
Send the slide deck into my house account.
Absolutely. And I will be in at the St. Louis meeting.
And if I could just ask briefly, what success have you seen as far as dealing with existing providers in Missouri offer this particular service? What has your response been from folks that you have approached to this point? If you can tell us, it's proprietary, I get that.
Honestly, it's been hit and miss. Some have not given me the opportunity. Those who have listened have welcomed the conversation. So we are moving forward with some in having dialogue on how we might be able to connect to their last pop, to their dark fiber that's not connected to anything, and extend it. Not all of them have been open arms, unfortunately. But I think if they understand that this isn't to replace them, it's simply a bridge until they're in the area. And we are still connecting and extending their services. I think once they understand the solution, they've been more open about conversation.
I have a few more. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I didn't want to interrupt you if you were finishing a thought.
I was just saying it hasn't been easy getting their attention.
So who have been your customers? Who's paying for it? Who's paying for it in North Carolina? And again, I don't want to ask something that you can't share.
I can share, absolutely. The connection is coming from a cellular SIM card. And instead of getting funds for a Wi-Fi hotspot, they're just putting those funds towards that SIM card. And paying that service. The kids don't have to pay for anything because they're going to log in with a secure password, and they're logging in to the school system. So they're not paying for that service.
So the school pays for it? Sorry.
Correct. It's on their network. They're already paying for it. It's just the kids are using it. The schools may have to increase their bandwidth because more people are on the network. So they might need more pipe, but the individual students are not paying anything because it's not a new connection, it's extending a current connection.
And what's the cost of extending that current connection to the school, for instance?
That's where it really does depend on, am I connecting to fiber? How many students do I need to get it to, or am I connecting to cellular? Here I can show you. These are some of our letters of support from the schools that we've been working with. But this is a good idea, a good resemblance of a small, medium, large sites. And what depends on is how far the students are from the backhaul that we're connecting to, how many students are needing to come on. If we're on fiber, we can get quite a few more students per distribution module than we can on cellular.
And so the cost varies based on the number of students or the number of people that would be utilizing the extended service?
Yeah, the number of students that we're connecting and how far they are. If all the students that we're connecting are right here at 101 or 102, then I wouldn't have to put distribution modules here. But I had to get a couple of kids over here that were just, out in a little area, a little further from the rest of the population. So,
I hate to harp on the cost question, but is there any way you could give us a sense of cost relative to?
A small one, roughly under $500,000. Medium is about 650, 700. And again, that depends. Some of these we had to buy solar panels because we had to put flagpoles in the middle of a field. So there was some additional cost. just to put mounting assets. And the large one is just under $1 million to get all of these kids. And I know, I hate the answer, it depends, but it really does depends. But I think this gives you a good indication of a small, medium, large. And of
Yeah.
course, if we're supporting multiple counties that are back to back with unserved areas, we can leverage assets, implementation, and really drive costs down even more.
No, and I understand it. It absolutely depends. It is incredibly helpful, though, to have some sort of figure just to relate it to other options and other
Absolutely.
considerations that the committee entertains. So.
We found it to be about a fifth of the cost of fiber.
And then how, I didn't catch this earlier, how far are you able to extend a service? You had mentioned the community that was 30 miles from the school. Is there a hard line where you go, yeah, 30 miles we can do, but 50 miles is the edge?
They're really, no, because we would change the solution. If fiber is 50 miles away, we would go to a cellular solution and find the closest tower, the best signal that we get 5 bars. As a matter of fact, this Kingston is cellular. We could not, the fiber was just too far. It would be too expensive to hop to get there. So we just found what the best cellular tower, I believe, was AT&T. It was the closest. We put an AT&T SIM card into the rugs. We found the best connection, honestly, at this gentleman's house. He had no internet. He said, I absolutely will let you plug this into my home. And then we put the distribution modules in areas that were 1,000 feet apart, because that's how far they can be for any student to connect to.
And so it's a cost prohibition, but there's no like line where you say, hey, we can't extend further from fiber beyond just the cost prohibition?
Correct. Okay. Then we would look at different backhauls that are closer for us to connect.
I'm just curious at what the technology is capable of doing. You know, if you had no cost whatsoever, you could theoretically use these distribution modules and the RUCs and so on and take a strong symmetrical 100 megabyte service and string it all the way out into the most rural parts of any state. I mean, is that a correct assumption? Again, no cost to associate.
That's correct. I mean, we could use the distribution modules. We can hop with only losing 2 to 5% degradation, which most APs lose 50% per hop. So by your second hop, you're done. We can put multiple RUCs in areas to do a mesh. This particular design has 2 RUCs. As you can see, these green are the RUCs and the red are the distribution modules.
I could jump in. You mentioned Doctors Without Borders. So we've talked about North Carolina. Are there any other places on planet Earth that this has been basically rolled out that you saw some success? And is there any documentation of that we could take a look at?
I have some other test and evaluations, and yes, we're doing more in North Carolina, and we're looking to get some funding in West Virginia. The only other places this is up and running, honestly, is in Venezuela for a tribe that it was purposely made for. Again, it's new, emerging, so you're not going to see this rolled out everywhere. We are trying to get that messaging out and have gone the extra. I mean, we've done everything in a very condensed amount of time to get this approved because of the need here in the United States. they can improve
From our
economic
standpoint, especially from an appropriation standpoint, and we had this talk at another town hall, basically, where emerging technologies are something we need to keep our eye on. But when we're talking the here and now, especially with federal dollars rolling in, we need to apportion what we have as wisely as possible. So basically, all options are on the table. We're just trying to figure out, from a data-driven standpoint, what we can hang our hat on to say, yeah, this has some definite promise, as opposed to other things out there. I've talked to folks who were in conceptual phases with, we're going to use some light, basically, as the last mile access. They're not even close to being deployable. That's something we need to be looking ahead. We try to, for us, future proofing. We're term limited. So, I'll be out in 5 years. Bill will be back for another 6. Bishop would be back for another 6. But, it's a perishable commodity for us. We need to be able to make decisions based on the data we have in front of us. So whatever you can provide, we would greatly appreciate. I appreciate your time this morning as well. Did you have any questions for us?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, just trying to make awareness out there, and I will certainly get this information over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More providers.
Yeah. We will move back into the live room here. Mr. Ash, would you care to share with us any of your perspective? Don't mean to call on you and put you on the spot here.
But we are.
But the more perspectives, the better. And it really does help with the final
I'm from
report.
a rural electric utility, Saco Sage Electric Cooperative, outside of the Greene County area. We serve 9 counties to the northwest of here. I heard about this the last minute this morning, wanted to come and see what you all had to say, what the other counties here, the other people representing this county had to say, and I appreciate hearing that. I think people are on the right track. Saco Sage has committed to providing our members with fiber to the home service. We are going to put the fiber on our lines and lease it to Connexon Connect to actually provide the service to our members. So we are trying to do what's best for our members with what's available. Any help the state can provide financially to support that will make it easier and faster for our members to get the service.
How many members do you serve?
We have just over 8,000.
And that's through 9 counties. Is that what you said?
Centered in Cedar and St. Clair County.
Okay. And then this initiative, because I've heard different stories from various co-ops, and almost everything you do has to be member driven. And so, have you seen a lot of enthusiasm from those members and the board and so on? I mean, it
very much
almost always has to be a priority, from what I understand.
Yes, very much so. The big question is when can we get it? When can we sign up? When it will be at our home? And right now we don't have that answer. It is in the planning stages. We are designing the system. We are running into some of the same cost problems with getting poles and stuff to make our system ready to handle the fiber. But we believe in within 4 years we will have every member connected, and that can go faster if we can get more funding that we don't have to borrow to do that.
Go ahead.
I'm kind of fascinated because I saw some stuff on social media regarding your kickoff and all that, and I was really excited to see that because to me, it would seem that your electric co-ops are a natural for this because, as we say, I think we're all starting to come to the realization that this is now a utility. It's just not something that's just a luxury. But in talking to other members within the umbrella of the electric co-op community, you get a lot of pushback from a lot of them because they just say the numbers just won't work. You know, we can't afford to do it. I'm curious how you all are crunching it to where you're able to say, yeah, this is doable, and why some of these other electric co-ops are seemingly at this juncture still got the brakes on, saying, well, it just economically isn't feasible.
It's a lot of money to borrow for the co-op. It's a big investment for it. We have excellent partners with Connects on Connect, and they are entering into a lease that will cover the cost of this project. But the board had to say that that's the deal we're looking for, to borrow the money up front, because it is our fiber, to use with our system that we're leasing out to them. But the lease is going to cover our cost. So I hope that other co-ops will be able to take advantage of similar partnerships if they can't find a way to do it themselves.
Well, I think it'd be very helpful to everyone up in Jeff City to kind of have you, put this in writing, how you were able to make the numbers work, so that when we're talking maybe some of the other co-ops, we can talk about the success of Sac Osage and how they were able to come up with a game plan that allowed it to cash flow, because I think that really then puts a little more pressure on the others to come along, because I just think it's a natural. Now, one other thing that there's been some issues with some electric co-ops has been the easements. Did you just have a general easement, so you don't have to go back to them now and get them to sign new easements? Because I've been told there's been some electric co-ops that's been an issue, that it was a very narrowly defined the way it was set up, and therefore running fiber optic does not fit under it.
We believe that we are within our easements with the way we are doing it, by owning the fiber, by using it for our electric service, and then leasing the availability of that out. The legislature gave us some help in this a few years ago to make us feel more comfortable. There are some. We would gladly welcome the legislature to do some things to make us feel even
more comfortable. Okay.
To make if we could make our lawyers feel comfortable, that would be great with that. But our members drive this, and our members want it. And unfortunately, because of the rural area and bringing this across the rural area, one member who stands up and gets a lawsuit involved can make it harder for everybody else.
Exactly.
So if the legislature could help us with that, to avoid that scenario when the great majority of our members are begging for us to get involved, would be great.
I'll just do the history lesson. So we're talking about another co-op that got whacked for, $129 million, I think was the final. So, because first it was unjust enrichment, and then it went up on appeal. And they said, oh no, you got the theory wrong. It's trespass. So 80 million went to 129, because we all know what trespass means in rural Missouri. So 18, we came in, basically said, we're gonna cut this off right here and now. So all past sins forgiven. Moving forward, the easement question isn't really the disaster it could have been. And, based on what I could read from that decision, some of the easements they were claiming hadn't even been recorded yet, which is a minor problem that's going to get you in a world of hurt when we're talking trespass. So from a legislative standpoint, we did, quote unquote, fix that. We fix lots of things in Jefferson City. We call it a fix, but we don't. So from your standpoint, what additional steps would we be able to take to make you as a provider much more comfortable, not just with the easement question, but another thing we get into is the make ready, the whole pole attachment question, the service territory question. You're leasing out basically your entire territory to one provider. Is that correct?
Leasing out the service, availability to a provider. Correct.
So are there any impediments that you're aware of that get in the way of a co-op being able to do that anywhere else?
This is a place where if I was more prepared to speak today, I'd probably have an answer for you. I'd have to get with our attorney who could give a better answer to the question.
Well, that'd be good information, I think, for the committee to have, if there's some other things that need to be done to make that smoother.
Yeah, that is really helpful, and I'm taking notes as well, but we'll certainly follow up and try and get some more information.
While you're here, I'll ask just a couple other questions. As far as the subscriber base, I mean, I've talked to some co-ops where frankly, I've got one in my area that was actually losing customers because the dynamic is the young people move away, they don't come back, and the old people die. So literally fewer customers. Was able to reverse that trend. I've talked to FFA vice presidents across the state now for several years. And long story short, we cry and we whine, oh, the young people are going away, they're never coming back. And my answer is, well, there's a reason for that. They don't have internet. They're digital natives. They grew up with this stuff. I didn't, but they did. This young man did. They're not coming back without that. So are you seeing any sort of basic, you mentioned your customers want it. From a board perspective going across the state, are you seeing folks that are engaged, basically saying, hey, there's some federal dollars coming down here. We want to be part of that. We want to be part of the state fund. Basically all hands on deck. Are you seeing a movement toward that, away from, oh, gee, it's great that we issue that $35 check at the end of the year instead of investing in our membership through deployment of whatever?
Yeah, it is a big push for our area. Our members have asked for it for a long time. Trying to speak more specifically to your question, I know with our real estate people, they tell us that once it's found out that something in our area doesn't have the broadband, that sale goes away. That those possibilities go away. So that's, it is a big push for us to have that be a part of the utility service.
Are you all KMO or
KMO is our service provider.
are you getting any support from them at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they will help provide the backbone to this service for it. And we're building, the fiber huts will be in connection with their substations.
Okay.
And to your point about realtors, to my immediate south, not my district, unfortunately, basically realtors were buying the service to get the fiber to the home, to sell the house. And we're seeing that, $5,000, $7,000 increase per assessed valuation parcel the nanosecond they have that available. Take rates approaching 90% all over the service territory because people understand, hey, a gig is something that is really nice, and talk about future-proofing that. But at the same time, they've run into problems with railroads, MoDOT in some instances, although MoDOT is relaxing its stance. Are there any other impediments out there that you can think of that you guys deal with basically on a daily basis that are problems to getting stuff out where you want it?
At this point, we're still in the planning stages, and we're going to run into a lot of that. Thankfully, our partner, Connexon, has dealt with this before and are, we believe, moving us in the right direction. So at this time, I couldn't speak to that specifically.
Well, let's get a little farther into the weeds. Sorry about that. So how many persons per square mile is your average service territory?
It's just over 4 accounts per mile of line that we have.
Thank you.
It's pretty sparse.
That puts it in perspective.
Yes.
That's quite a commitment for that sparse. So.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think we're going to take a quick break. We have a superintendent who's planning on being here at 10:45, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm going to say let's take about a 15-minute break, 10 to 15-minute break, I suppose. and reconvene at 10:45 or 10:50? Yeah. We'll reconvene at 10:45, give everyone a chance to use the restroom or catch up on email or whatever the case may be before we reconvene. Thank you.
Very timely, Mr. Chairman.
Some folks an opportunity, a little bit of an out if they needed it, which is also part of the intent. I was able to use the restroom. That was the other part of the intent. But for those in the Zoom room, we're going to be beginning once again. We're going to start here in the live room with Dr. Matt Teeter, who is our superintendent of Willard School District, and is actually Willard is represented by both Representative Owen and myself. So we're happy to have you, and we thank you for your perspective and talking to us a little bit about the school side of things. And other than that, we'll just hop right into it. So
Sounds good.
the floor is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Appreciate you guys inviting me to this opportunity to just share a little bit about Willard District. Both of you are obviously familiar with our district and both with the nature of our district is city, as well as Springfield city limits, as well as rural. About half of our students in Willard Public Schools come from Springfield addresses, and the other half come from Willard address at large. So if you look at our school district, we're made up of half and half in regards to really the conversation today. I would say half of our students have the access that we're desiring for every student, and then half of them have to figure out a different way, be it HughesNet or their hotspot on their phone, whatever it may be, certainly not as reliable as what the hardwired internet, fiber cable, whatever it may be, with the companies that they serve. So this past year definitely brought light to that. As you know, during COVID, we had the opportunity to really see if our infrastructure was ready for virtual education. And I think we found out pretty quickly while we can do it, certain groups of students and teachers, honestly, it doesn't matter, staff members, doesn't matter who you are, have better access than others. And I think one thing that's critical in education is access. There's two things we talk about as a district is every student having the opportunity to feel that they belong. And I think another piece to that is access. And so the conversation that I get to have with you all today is, and encourage, I guess, is what we can do to build the infrastructure for our students in order to have access anytime, anywhere, any place, I think impacts education. And ultimately, education impacts, I think, human success and what we would call life-ready graduates in our district here in Willard. So passionate about this. There are, I know students that would be glad to speak to this committee if warranted or needed. Representative Davidson, just request that, and we could bring you some. Heck, even including my own kids, who we live out in the country, and we use Verizon, and it does well enough. But there are times that obviously there's no access. I will tell you that on the bottom of where we live, there is no access, internet access, period. There's no cell service. So there are places within our district, if you will, in Willard School District, that have zero access still as is. And so just wanted to share that with you and appreciate the support of doing some investigation on what we can do in order to benefit all kids, but also in that I think it benefits them beyond just our our education, if you will, grade 12. I think it goes into just life in general. If the board's okay with this, just to express, one of my board members would have probably moved out to closer to my area, but because he owns a technology business, that was not an option. So I think that says a lot. If our rural areas do not have the option for small businesses and to grow our small businesses in the state of Missouri, which I know is very important to you both as well as our governor, I think that says a lot. So he wasn't going to buy any land in that area because the internet access is cellular at this point, and he needs a much more reliable source for his business.
I'll jump in if that's all right. One of the things I was looking forward to hearing from you is because, as you pointed out in the very beginning, I mean, it's almost like you got three different subsets within your students. You've got one subset that lives in the city limits of Springfield that, if they aren't already, will at some point within the next year have high-speed fiber optic. Then you've got students that live out around the city of Willard that have probably some halfway decent options, and then you get up to Sackville and Highway BB, and as you say, there's just no. How, as a school district, how do you? I mean, you have to understand that. I mean, some kids have, some kids don't. What do you do to kind of equalize things? I mean, do you just? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how a kid has the same opportunities that lives up by you as opposed to the kid that's in Springfield. That's I've got high-speed internet right here at my fingertips.
Yeah, great question. At the end of the day, our role is to do whatever we can to support each and every student. And so what we did this past year, just kind of explain what we did. Is it perfect? No, and I think we can get better, right? And that's why I'm here today, and appreciate the opportunity for being here today. And is we ended up getting hotspots. And honestly, cell service in our entire district is different. So we drove around. I mean, think about this. We're driving around. This is the 21st century, right? It's 2021, 2020, 2021. And we're having our technology guys, exactly, go around and go, hey, do we have service? Do we have service? So we couldn't partner with T-Mobile, who's in our backyard, would have loved that opportunity, but it wouldn't have covered. We had to go with who would cover our district the best, first of all, right? So therefore, in some ways, we weren't even able to be competitive and do an RFP, anything like that. There was like one that covered better than everybody else. So to your point, so with that, we had students that, like you said, had tremendous access. Even our students who were in town, some of them did not have access due to financial constraints, things like that. So we provided a hotspot, and we had about 200 of them. And overall, that ended up being a pretty good number for us for the year. This next year, we're going to reduce that just a little to 130. But if you didn't have service and you couldn't do it, what we thought was the right answer was providing grace, which was when you return, we'll figure that out with you. We'll do the best we can. So there were phone calls that happened to just connect with every one of our students to say, when they were absent, to say, what do you need from us for support? So did learning, I think our overall goal is we want learning to always be this positive momentum forward. I think at times during quarantine, depending on your access, we were just hoping there was no loss. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I think we had three different experiences. And I think you're right. In Willard, there are some companies there's some fiber, but you're right. It's not near as probably robust as what the Springfield infrastructure is. And so I would say we did our best, but in my opinion, not good enough for kids.
Can you, and I think over the last year and a half, right, it's been glaring, the importance and the significance of broadband access for education. That's also been couched, obviously, in quarantines and staying at home and being educated online. Can you speak to the importance, even over the last decade, or so, of broadband access to in-person education as we all, hope and anticipate returning to those more traditional models in the future anyways?
No, absolutely. So I love what you said, and Governor Parsons and our Commissioner, Margie Van Dieven, said the same thing last Tuesday, which is in-person learning, we all know is best. It's interesting how we went from the year before where that was not necessarily the pillar. I know in Southwest Missouri, certainly our district, we felt like that was the best, but now collectively as a nation, we've determined, right, that's what's best. And it's interesting, right? So the internet is just not for those who are in quarantine or virtual, want to choose to virtually learn. It is also for our students who are in person. One of the desires we have is that education is not just a 8 to 3, if you will. If I'm a student, that's my job. We want to create an environment where people are learning all the time. And so access to the internet where we're able to do the research, which are a lot of projects. We've talked about flipped classrooms. Flipped classrooms is really where you do a lot of the learning at home, and then you come to school and there's more collaborative learning, right? Which is really how most businesses excel, is through synergy, is in that room of collaboration. And so we also have the opportunity. I'll give you an example, a project that my daughter had, which was about pets. She really wants a dog. And so she made clear to me that she was going to make this amazing presentation about a dog or multiple dogs or different types of dogs, right? So she...
Fortunately, she had no internet and so no dog, right?
Yeah, I should have just pulled the example.
Yeah.
She and another student at times, to your point, weren't able to work on it all the time, weren't able to FaceTime, right, or Skype or Zoom all the time. So it's kind of both. They were able to work on it some, but it had to be within somewhat these constructs of the internet that we had available, not to the other party. The other party actually had fiber. So it's twofold, I guess, as this example is, number one, they had an amazing opportunity, right, to learn at home. And it's not, if we can make learning fun, right? Gosh, we can think about all of our experiences. Learning is fun. We're not even thinking of the hard work that learning is because we're so engaged in the item. So my daughter was learning all those skills, highly engaged, manipulating a PowerPoint, communicating with her teammate, but not honestly to the level that she probably could have because we didn't have that access. But to your point, Representative Davidson, I think the reliability of that would have just enhanced it even more than what we currently do. So a lot of our high school, I'll give you an example. High school has Canvas. You may be familiar with Canvas or not. Blackboard or Canvas tends to be where all of our colleges land. I think a lot more are probably moving towards the Canvas arena. The opportunity to work from home is essential for our students. And then in our younger students, we have a product called Seesaw, and that provides an opportunity as well, a little bit different, but an opportunity for our students to engage and frankly create a digital part of our strategic plan in our district as Life Ready graduates. Under that is a digital portfolio that they can archive stuff on a continual basis. So that being said, I just think the internet offers, and that infrastructure offers so many opportunities. And I think in the 21st century, gosh, we're darn close, and we should have this opportunity for each and every one of our students.
And this, brings up another question in my mind. We talk a lot about symmetrical and asymmetrical service, those upload and download speeds being, the same or different. And we talk about the agricultural industry, that they really need symmetrical service. And when we think through broadband development throughout the state, it's going to be addressing different challenges at different times in different places, and it's going to be a really sort of meticulous, thought-through strategy. In terms of education, in agriculture, we're being told symmetrical service is vital. In terms of the educational space, how do you feel symmetrical? And obviously, we all, symmetrical is better. What I'm really asking for, though, is the future of education. How important will that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, again, you're talking to someone who's accessing a Verizon, and again, they do the best they can. But to download anything, if I'm going to try to download a video that I want to send to my teacher, right? If I'm in the Teeter family, it's almost impossible, right? It's almost, and I will tell you where education is going is and continues to go is the ability to demonstrate these skills and really not as time bound as in 8 to 3, but how can we demonstrate these skills in other ways? So it's interesting you talk about, and then the download's the same. So if there is a video, while it's really hard to upload, it's also really hard to download if there's supposed to be a 5-minute clip that I'm supposed to watch. So honestly, that was probably our biggest issue is we had to navigate how much bandwidth do we use per video for each one of our kids. And so we navigated that, and I think it had to be less than 5 minutes holistically if we were going to create not create a bigger accessibility issue within our system. So I hope that answers your question. I think there's a significant need for that piece. And with that piece, I think it allows education to expand even more, because if we don't have it guaranteed there, we're not using our creative juices, if you will, to create in that space as much to benefit our kids.
So we are seeing more need for upload speeds
Absolutely.
as well. Just because when I went to school, not that we didn't have internet, but everything would have been download. It was all about what you were downloading. It wasn't really a question of what you were uploading, because I was rarely sending anything more than an email.
Sure.
To a teacher at any given time. But you're talking about like digital portfolios and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
That starts to change the calculation. Go ahead. Yeah.
My turn. Thank you. I'm taking a little different direction. You mentioned basically life-ready students, and that's something I know all school districts are struggling with. So you've got kids who basically have nothing. We had this talk to some extent, Kansas City, with stakeholders there. It's digital literacy. So dealing with young people, because 99% of your job applications are online now, who didn't know how to create an email account, basically could turn on the computer, couldn't figure out how to bookmark a particular site. Are you running into any of that as far as not just the kids, but the parents who are dealing with these issues? If they have no internet at all, and I'll just say it, I've got an economic developer in Shelby County who literally has to go out in the middle of Highway 15 and dodge grain trucks to get a signal. There's some just horribly deficient areas in the state, and you've got one. How do we navigate through that particular space? I mean, these kids are being left behind now. What types of strategies are you guys looking at to basically get across that bridge?
I think the blessing we have is we have internet access at each one of our buildings that's highly, highly, highly reliable. And our students have the opportunity to engage in that on a consistent basis. And so we do have a digital literacy component to teaching, if you will, and a huge piece of that is honestly the usage of it. Many of our students are the ones teaching us how to transition and move that. So I think your parent piece is probably a little more interesting than me, and I think actually our students are probably aiding our parents in that much more than our students not having the access for that, because between the hours of 8 and 3, I'll get the blessing of when I arrived at the district 5 years ago. Dr. Kent Medlin was our superintendent, and a couple years prior to my arrival had made it a point that we would have a one-to-one apparatus or device initiative, and we actually were 3 to 12 when I arrived, and now we're one-to-one. K, not for pre-K, but K through 12, they have an opportunity for a device, which we did not have in the past. So I don't think it's an issue for kids on regards to digital literacy as much it is for, like you said, for businesses or for parents that may not have the access. And I just think about my neighbors that are just a few houses down. I'm on the top of the hill, if you will, and they're on the bottom of the hill. They do not have that access, and I would be interested, to your point, how they even do internet. They probably are driving someone or going to somebody's house in order to access that.
Yeah, they're going to town, and that's I don't know how many phone calls these guys get, but I got plenty of them.
Yeah,
and basically because they had to to go to the parking lot of the school
To access it.
and to access anything. And that was,
And by the way, that's something as a district, we have open access intentionally because we feel like we've been given that opportunity to help our community. Same thing.
actually talked to districts, they put the Wi-Fi hotspots on the buses. And move the buses as they're delivering meals.
Sure.
This is, everybody's locked in. And basically alternating, so you've got this whatever 5-10 minute window, get your stuff in.
Yeah, to download, upload, whatever it may be.
I also talked to people, admin directors, 2-3 in the morning, students who missed that window, struggling to get things done, pulling their hair out. Their access, even at that time, which nobody else is using it, is still so substandard they couldn't get any substantial file done. And I was going to ask too, as far as we went from a lot of folks who were online exclusively then back to in-seat, but the option remained for students to stay online. So what percentage of your students moving into this school year prefer to stay?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll go back to last year. We were pretty fortunate. We ended up probably at 7% to start the year, and then by the time we ended the year was closer to 5% of our overall population. That's pretty unique. I think, again, there's probably multiple factors in that. I think many districts were quite a bit more than what we were. This year, we just made the decision that the option of masking is strongly encouraged, but not required. And so there will be some fluctuation. I know even this morning, there were already two that had called and said, hey, we're going to make that decision. And hey, we support that. Everyone deserves the opportunity to make the best decision in the interest of their family. They're in our Willard School District. We will always welcome them back. Honestly, they're continuing to be, if they need support, which, by the way, we do provide support for those students who are on virtual learning. I'm going to guess, and this is a real big guess because I don't have the exact numbers yet, and I can text you here and see what the update is if you'd like, but I would guess we're more around 3% at this point, 2 or 3%, not nearly the amount, obviously, of 5% that we were in the past. And I think a part of that had to do with, I think we managed COVID pretty stinking well. We really, by the time we hit May, there was hardly anything going on. We had a really good summer school. And we think we're going to be in a good place moving forward for our district starting the school year as well. So I think the blessing is we have trust with our community, and we're going to do everything we can to keep students safe, but also we understand virtual learning, and we also understand masking can sometimes inhibit face-to-face learning as well. And we had a lot of feedback from specifically elementary, the connection we have even now, right? The facial expressions that we're able to provide. That's an important part of the learning process. So through that, partnered with Greene County and made that decision, and appreciate their support and partnership in that.
Another side issue of that, and I'm not sure how many people were aware of it, were because they didn't have their reporters, they weren't seeing the reporters daily, that the child abuse reports across the state fell off a cliff. Doesn't mean it wasn't happening, it just wasn't being reported. So we don't know what the psychic damage long range of that is going to be, but
yes,
agree wholeheartedly, in-seat is obviously the way to get at that. I want to do a little follow-up question, though, as far as flipped classrooms. I know that's basically YouTube, part of that process for most folks. When they flip the switch and folks basically lock down, I had phone calls from people in my district in the city with good internet between the hours of 8 and 5 having problems with their internet connection. And contacted DED. So what's going on? Well, any given moment, 8 to 5, 45% of all the bandwidth in the state, 2 providers, Netflix and YouTube.
Yep.
So talk to other educators, what's your login rate? Well, 75, 80% to start. And let's, 5 to 10% of kids are going to be absent any given day anyway due to just sickness or whatever. By the end of that semester, they were down 25, 30%. So as things went forward, students lost interest more and more. And at the same time, oh, by the way, they're binge watching stuff. I'm sure they were doing, some of it was the flipped classroom, but a lot of it just flat out wasn't. So I think, we as policymakers agree that we don't want to go down that road.
Agreed.
And basically, we've lost a year of instruction, and only the Lord knows what that's going to mean, the state moving forward. And I ask this question, I try to, if everybody comes up in front of us, what impediments do we as a state put in front of you as you try to do your job as far as internet access or any other type of access? Basically, it stands between you and your students.
Wow. Thank you for asking that question. When I think of barriers, opportunities, you guys blow that down. I do think it comes back to infrastructure. I mean, my biggest plea would be infrastructure for our students and honestly our community. So we can filter out Netflix and YouTube. Frankly, we do. So there's a limited access. So our kids on their hotspot don't have that same opportunity unless they're geniuses and figure out a way around, which, by the way, I'm sure there's plenty of those. but I think it's infrastructure. That's the number one, and maybe that's the easy answer, but it's the answer that's glaring to my face. And so that's the big one that comes to mind for me is let's have an infrastructure that certainly supports education, but I think it supports workforce development. I think it supports small business development. I think it supports bigness. I mean, can we have a business in Shelby County, right? You were talking about Shelby County earlier. We should be able to have a business up there, and it shouldn't be inhibited by no internet access. Same thing for Green Rural County. I think we're in the same boat. So I think it has an impact on families as much as which of course impacts our students as well.
Well, looking at this generation and all the surveys where I've dealt with 18 to 22-year-olds, for a living, a lot of them want to work for themselves.
That's right.
They do. And I encourage it. I mean, it's entrepreneurship, something we need a lot of. They just literally don't have the bandwidth.
Yep.
I've talked to young couples sitting on not even letter blacktops on state routes, didn't have broadband access enough to take a PayPal payment. Well, how are you supposed to push product out if you can't do that? You can't. And according to DESI, we've got 23% of our students today don't have 25/3 access. Do you know what the percentage is within your district?
I do not. I couldn't answer that. I think we're probably a little bit better than that, but probably not much better than that.
Yeah, I did want to ask one other question. As far as the hotspots, have there been any questions or concerns about the security of those?
So before they go out, good question. So it's interesting, like before they go out, they are actually, each one is governed by our technology department. So maybe, that would be a nice barrier. It'd be great to just have these things almost programmed, right? So our technology department is spending time on each one of these devices before they go out and configuring them so that they are as safe as possible and filtered with all the right software, if you will, and uploads needed in order to create security. So that is how we do it. And so it's manual, each one device.
Thank you.
Has the last year or year and a half, obviously it's maybe slowed the virtual learning train, as it were. Has it affected any sort of sentiment when it comes to screen times and screens in schools, especially for younger students, in elementary schools and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think there was a conversation, at least in our district before, because we were one-to-one, that there was already, hey, we need to be intentional about not always being on the screen, kind of to your point, especially, like you said, in the elementary level. So I think it just heightened that conversation to another point. Again, we were pretty blessed that 95% of our students. So I'm not going to say the year was normal, but I'm really proud that we persevered and pushed through. And I think we're part of the reason that you see the Biden administration say everybody needs to be face-to-face. I mean, CDC was doing research here in Springfield, research on Republic, research on Logan Rogersville, and I think many of the recommendations that end up being handed downwards because we showed that we can have school. So super proud of that. Kind of back to your question, though, that is a conversation that, frankly, devices don't they can extend learning, but they're usually not the initiator of deep learning. And so we really have to be cognizant of how to balance that. Now, you can use the devices very intentionally. We have experts and teachers who do that. But I think social awareness and self-awareness, I'm not sure that can come anywhere else other than having a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah. And then, and sorry for hopping around here a little bit. Your district not only, has rural and urban people going to the same schools, it also has all sorts of different students coming from all sorts of different family backgrounds. And when we talk about broadband, access is probably the preeminent conversation, but affordability is a close second.
Yep.
Do you happen to have any sort of information or data of your district in terms of, maybe you talked about roughly 50%, maybe 50% of your students are able to access it, but it's nowhere near that number based on an affordability standpoint.
So I would tell you about 90, we actually had a survey just, I think it was 2 years ago, 90, I want to say 98% have access somehow, some way to a device that has the ability to connect to the internet. But most of the people, it's that device, right? It's the phone. That's the only device. I don't know how much you've tried to tether your phone to your laptop and use your phone as hotspot. It's
Nightmare.
yeah, it doesn't really work well. So, so if you think about that piece of it, right, I'd say it drastically reduces to probably kind of to your percentage that you're talking about, like reliable internet. So they're using their phone, but then again, how much data do they have on their phone? Like, these are all the conversations that we were having last year as we were setting up, the year before in 2019, spring of 2019, to set up for 2020. How do we honor data plans? How do we honor, right? Which then, of course, does what? Kind of to your point, it constrains us into how creative can we be to educate our students. So absolutely, it is, and I think will continue to be a concern until we offer an infrastructure that provides the affordability piece to it as well.
Did anyone in your district use any of the federal emergency funds?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's how we got our hotspots. Just
That was all of them?
Yeah. So, we had our hotspots cost close to $200,000 last year, I think is what it ended up being, for the number that we had all year. Actually, I think we had more than 200 hotspots. I think we were, now that I say it, we went for 10%-ish, 9%. We had 400. And then each hotspot's $40 a month, and you can't quit service. Like, once you start service. So we were in a position that was $40 a month for that amount of hotspots. So yeah, pretty big price tag. Again, appreciate the Trump's administration right away providing us with ESSER 1 money, which was about $500,000. That ended up paying for hotspots and really the additional students who were on launch in some way or another. If you will, because that was an extra expense that we were not obviously prepared for. This year, obviously, we're much more prepared. We have quite a fewer students on launch, and so we were able to budget appropriately as well. So,
Yeah, I think, anyone have any other questions?
I think he's covered it.
Yeah. And just to be clear, that survey didn't include how they had acquired that internet or to what?
No, it didn't. Right.
So we don't. There's no data on that
It could be
necessarily.
on debt, right? We're running my debt up in order for me to have internet access. To your point, which doesn't benefit anybody.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. I had said before, I'll be emailing afterwards anyone who's testified, and if you have anything you'd like to send to us in the way of a white paper or one pager, or have someone on your IT team send something over.
I'll work on that.
Anything you got from the CDC as well, as far as the NC line? That's also something that we strategically we need to basically plan out. But we're trying to future-proof what we do here and look around corners. And obviously, if somebody's been in town and has done that, so we basically trying to figure out as many resources we get our hands on to analyze what we need to do as a state. And that's policy as well as appropriation.
Sure.
Yeah. So
You know, if I could say one more thing, I just think it's interesting that electricity goes to every house that I'm aware of. There's probably a percent maybe that does not have access, but I just think there's an infrastructure in place. Additionally, there was a phone line to pretty much every place in the past. So how can we use our current infrastructures that we already have and just play off that? And obviously, you guys had the co-op before expressing what they're doing. I just think there makes sense, and I get that. May it make business sense? No, not all the time, but there is one-time money coming in. I would strongly encourage us to consider an infrastructure build with one-time money, right? We're in the same boat. We're going to get one-time money of ESSER funds of, I think, close to $6 to $7 million. To spend that on ongoing costs is not really wise at the end of the day because it's going to be gone. But we are thinking about how can we manage that money and steward it well, understanding that it's not going to be around for, honestly, much longer. It's a one-time windfall. And while money's great, if you don't manage it and steward it appropriately, it gets a lot of people into trouble, right? So I think about infrastructure, I think about one-time costs, and I think about we have systems already in place to do that. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
To that point, we do have a request in $250 million ask at this point for the state broadband fund. Return on investment of that's been 7 to 1. So that represents almost $2 billion that we would have, at the state level. That's something we're very vigilant about. Want to make sure that we get that money out there. But, these various areas, like you have sort of a hybrid district. We really want to pay attention to folks who are dealing with all those issues in real time and how do we basically navigate that type of dynamic where it's like this, group has it, this group, someone has it. It's like the entire state, but you got a microcosm of that in your district. So thank you for presenting today.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to continue giving an opportunity to those in the Zoom room. Many have taken me up on it, but if there's anyone in the Zoom room who'd like a chance to testify before the town hall, it's not a committee, for the record. It's a town hall.
Who have we not heard from?
In the Zoom room, Mr. Gamble, I think, is what I'm reading. Mr. Coulter, Nathan. There's a few. We would love to hear from you. We also have a few here in the room that we're looking forward to hearing from. I know Mr. Allen just walked in from Total High Speed. We'd love a chance to hear from you if you'd like to share with the. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry I'm late.
No worries. This is a very open forum, so we have people coming in and out, and that works well.
Cool. Well, I'm Travis Allen. I started Total High Speed Internet in this area, in Ozark actually, in 2005. So that was before Netflix did streaming, before Facebook, and YouTube didn't even exist yet. So a lot has changed. And we started off with wireless internet, and that was the way we could afford to build the network, basically, wireless internet to mostly rural areas, places where there's no cable company, no phone company, providing internet service. And then over the years, we've grown that. We've got about 300 towers now in Southwest Missouri, cover about 19 counties. And a big chunk of our business is, of course, here in Greene County. So that's where the population is. And then we started doing fiber to the home about 4 years ago, building fiber lines all the way to the home. So some companies, say they have fiber, but it's really just fiber to a node. And then from there, it's copper out to the houses. But ours is fiber all the way into the house, even from the side of the house into the house, it's fiber. So all the way. So that gives us the ability to do really, really fast speeds. We can do hundreds of megabits, even gigabits per second. We offer a gig right now for only $95 a month. And we can do more than that in the future. We're planning, like a lot of companies like Google Fiber in Kansas City offers a 2 gig plan now. So we'll be able to do that in the future as well. So anyway, I started looking for a way to run fiber to all of our current wireless customers. I started looking for that several years ago. And when you search on Google for how to get millions of dollars or borrow millions of dollars to build fiber, there's no hits. There's no results for that. You don't get millions of hits for that. So anyway, couldn't find any way to do it. Finally stumbled upon the Rural Utility Service, which is the same agency or department of the United States Department of Agriculture that built those electric lines, the rural electric lines and the rural telephone lines, or at least paid for them, gave the loans and the grants, paid for them, all the way back to 1936. So the Telecommunications Act of 1936 is kind of what sort of launched that whole agency. So anyway, I resisted. I didn't want to have to, get funds from the government, but eventually had to do it. So we applied for a loan and grant combination through the Rural E-Connectivity Program, the Reconnect program, which is a funny acronym because Reconnect, we're reconnecting people that have never had service. So it's a government acronym, I guess. But anyway, the Reconnect program, we applied for $40 million and we're awarded that. That's going to cover a big chunk of northern Greene County, so just north of Springfield and east all the way to the county line pretty much, and then west to almost to Ash Grove, and then south down to Bodark, and then north up a little bit into Dallas County. And then there was a round 2 of that program. We applied for that as well and got a $50 million award for that round, and that's going to allow us to build a lot more fiber in Greene County and then a bunch of the other counties around here. So all in, that'll be 1,800 miles of fiber, and it'll pass about 18,000 locations. So about 10 locations a mile. So we're pretty excited about that. We've begun construction just this summer, and we have 5 years to build it. So it's a big project. Of course, everything, hit the fan at the same time. Prices start going up for material, and lead times for fiber get out. Like right now, I just got an email this morning that our lead times to get fiber is about in 2023, actually. So if we want to buy a large quantity of fiber, we won't get it till 2023. We can get little pieces, a little mile here, mile there. But if we want to build 1,800 miles, it's going to be 2 years before we can get the fiber. So anyway, stuff like that. We also submitted an application for the NTIA program that was recently available. And so we'll see how that goes. It's going to reach into Webster County mostly. Because with our Reconnect program, we've kind of pretty well hit most of Greene County that we can do that's not already funded by some other program, like a CAF2 or RDOF or something like that. So anyway, that's the future, I think, of getting broadband into rural areas is the funding. We've got to find ways to pay for it because it's just really expensive. It's anywhere, if you bury it, it's about $50,000 to $60,000 a mile. Even on poles, it can be real expensive because a lot of the poles were put in decades ago and they're not in very good shape. They have to be replaced. That's called make ready, and that gets real expensive too. And the biggest hurdle for us has been obtaining easements in rural areas because you got to go out and talk to every landowner along the path and get them to sign easements. Even the electric cooperatives sometimes might have to do that because their easement from years ago didn't include any language regarding, fiber. It was just electric, So anyway, we're trying to build as much fiber as we can in this area. And I grew up in Ozark and just love infrastructure and want to be able to provide more and more good internet service to the areas around here. So whether that's with wireless or fiber, I prefer fiber these days. It's long-term. It's the administrator of the RUS, Chad Roop, years ago said, build it once, build it right, move on. And that's what I agree with that. So that's kind of what we're doing. I didn't hear the first part of the meeting this morning, so I'm not exactly sure if that is what you guys are looking for, or I'm not sure.
No, it's exactly what we're looking for. So you had talked about some of those that you consider that biggest hurdle to be securing easements, and that's what you'd consider probably the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, because if you bury it, you can go along a road, right of way, a county road, state road, and that's inexpensive. State's free, county charges a fee. And it's kind of expensive, actually, compared to Christian County. Christian County's a lot cheaper. It's only $100 for the whole permit. Greene County's so much dollars per mile or half mile. I forget how it works. But anyway, in the grand scheme of things, it's not too expensive. Whereas going out on poles that don't follow the road, you got to get easements and do make ready.
And you had mentioned the cost of $50,000 to $60,000 a mile for you to bury it. What's the cost for the make ready?
Well, if you go if you go aerial, if you go on poles, in theory, it should only be about $16,000 a mile. But that's before make ready, and that's before getting any easements. That's just labor and materials.
Okay.
So sometimes the cost ends up being just as high as buried or very close. I did a real small project last year, and it was it was only like, I don't remember, it was like 2 miles, maybe a 5 or something like that. And we got the make ready for the poles. It was going to be $17,000 to do it on aerial. We could hire a contractor to do the same thing. Well, I guess it wasn't 2 miles, it was a lot less. Anyway, it was only $18,000 to bury it. So we just said, well, just bury it, you know.
Is it the same easement process to bury it as it would be to go on
Well,
poles?
normally when you bury it, you're going along county roads or state roads. So you don't have to get an easement. You just get a permit from the county or the state or the city.
Yeah. That's actually interesting to me. So you're burying it along roads. I mean, is there any sort of thought to, doing more, like, couldn't you save the amount of fiber, I guess, if you weren't following along roads and kind of went?
Normally, most people live fairly close to a road, so it makes more sense to just go along the roads.
Okay.
But traditionally, the electric cooperatives especially have cut out across fields just to get there quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they did that before the road was there, like many, many years ago.
Yeah, and I'm just curious about what it would be like to bury. And is there an easement that already exists there? But I guess we already have spoken about that the contracts don't include. These old contracts weren't
Right. The old
weren't
easements
anticipating. They would have.
If you read the newest ones that they've wrote in the last 20 years or so, the cooperatives use nowadays, it covers everything. I mean, every single possible way you might ever run a wire on a piece of land. It's got every word, and then it says, like, after that, it says, in any other way of doing it,
Yeah.
So they're trying to cover everything nowadays.
Yeah.
The key, though, for the future to get, broadband into rural areas is just funding. There's, everybody wants it. The demand is there. I think once it's there, we can talk about, adoption, affordability, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the key right now is just getting it available to people.
And is it independently profitable for you once it's there? I mean, are you guys able, as far as like maintenance costs and things along those lines? I mean, how many people do you need to hook up on any given mile before it becomes privately sustainable?
Well,
after the infrastructure is invested?
I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head exactly, but in this area, we get about 10 locations a mile when we build in the rural, which is pretty good. The national average for all electric cooperatives in the whole country is about 7.4 locations a mile, is how much electric customers they have,
Yeah.
So we're a little above average here, so that's good. And it's kind of strange, actually, because our round one award from Reconnect was 10 locations a mile. A different area, it's kind of south of Springfield, southeast of Springfield, and southwest of Springfield is where our round two award is, but it's also 10 locations a mile, if you average it out. And then even the NTIA grant that we applied for in Webster County is 10 locations a mile. So we're pretty good at 10 locations a mile all around this area. But like the Reconnect program is half, there's several ways you can apply for it, but we applied for half grant, half loan. So we get a loan and a grant, and half of it's half and half, 50-50. And that is really necessary to make it, sustainable or even make it possible for us to build it.
Yeah.
If we didn't have half of it as a grant, we wouldn't even be able to make the loan payments on the whole thing. And that's at a really good loan. That's a 20-year amortization with only 2% interest here. So.
Yeah. And then could you speak to some of the other offerings you have? You had talked about a gigabyte for $95 a month. Do you have like more affordable packages?
Yeah, I've actually got a brochure here.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know if anybody would need one of these, but I brought them just in case.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, there's a 55, 75, and a 95. $55 gives you 100 meg, symmetrical. So that's a pretty key thing. Upload and download is 100 meg. All of our plans are symmetrical. So 300 by 300 for 75. And then 1,000 by 1,000, that's the gig for 95.
What are your take rates?
In rural areas, we're way over 50% usually. The first several projects we built, we haven't actually got, with the Reconnect, we haven't got anything like finished yet, so we don't have a take rate for that yet. When we apply for it, we have to project a 30% take rate just to be super conservative and make sure that even with only 30%, we can pay the loan payments. But yeah, all of our other projects are way over 50%. Some of them are as high as 90%. First project we built was south of Highlandville, 95 homes and like 85 customers now.
So what are you finding, and we're hearing this anecdotally from our realtors, what are you finding out from your realtor community as far as new constructing, existing, people wanting to move into a particular area? If the house doesn't have some sort of functional, good internet, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard many times, and this has been going on for years, but a lot of customers will write, the buyers of real estate, will write their contract contingent on whether they can get broadband or not. And they'll actually back out of contracts, because they find they can't get it. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't that savvy. And then they buy the house and then they find out, oh, I can't get broadband at this location.
So you had a phone call from a gentleman, bought about $500,000 worth of house and didn't do that due diligence. It's like,
Yeah.
I have no internet. Like, well,
Yeah.
who's your whatever? And went down a little checklist. But those folks are out there. I was also going to ask, 19 counties, are all those in Missouri?
Well, no, there's 2 counties in Arkansas.
So basically, excuse me, the southwest corner of the state, how far east do you go and how far north?
We go to West Plains east. We have 3 towers in West Plains, and then we go all the way west, almost to Joplin, to about Sarcoxy, and then north up to Bolivar and Buffalo, and then south down into Arkansas. It gets pretty sparse out there, though.
As far as mentioned federal dollars, have you looked at anything from the state fund yet?
Yeah, so the NTIA sort of goes through the state, I mean, it does, but it's a covered partnership relationship. So it's, I don't think anybody really knows exactly how that's going to work quite yet, but we'll figure it out. And then, but the one that they've done every year for the last couple of years, we've considered it, but we were in the middle of the Reconnect application, and it's a very detailed application, about 140 pages just to get through it. So we focused on that. We haven't applied for the state grant program yet.
I was going to ask you, as far as public-private partnerships, we had one of our co-ops this morning talked about basically contracting out with a separate entity to do their service area, 9 counties. And basically, they lease out their infrastructure to other folks. In other words, they're not basically being providers, but they're facilitating the process. What kind of experiences you've had regarding that particular dynamic?
Which electric company was that?
Right back here.
Sac Osage. Okay, cool. So yeah, I actually invited the leaders of Ozark Electric and White River and Laclede and all the electric cooperatives around here over to our office, last year, and then COVID happened, and so they didn't come, and then they finally came earlier this year, and we got together, and I basically proposed, I think what you're talking about is maybe, do you guys build the lines and then lease the capacity out to providers and ISPs? Is it similar to the Springfield City Utilities model?
I don't know what their model is. It's through Connect on Connect.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Jonathan Chambers?
Yes.
So anyway, I assume it's kind of like where they build the lines and then they lease them out to other providers. That's kind of like what City Utilities here in Springfield's doing. So anyway, I invited those guys over to our office to talk about, would they want to do something similar? They could build it, own the network, and then, we and other ISPs could lease the capacity and provide the end user service, and actually be the ISP, And basically they all said something similar in that they just couldn't find a way to make it work. Even if they did it that way, it would still be too expensive from the studies that they've done in the past. So it doesn't seem like that's going anywhere right now.
How many counties would that represent?
Well, each of them kind of crosses county boundaries and has a weird map. I've got a Google Earth overlay of all the electric cooperatives around here, but I don't know off the top of my head. There was, I think, 4 electric cooperatives that came to the meeting, and then a representative from Show Me Technologies, which uses poles from all of the different co-ops around here. to get fiber for most of your businesses.
So what impediments are you seeing from us at the statewide level as you deploy? What are you running into as far as roadblocks?
Really, we don't have too many roadblocks. It's just funding. We just need the funding to be able to build it. We have a good system here in Missouri. I mean, it's the state highways are the people that we deal with there to get a permit have been very helpful, very easy to work with. Mostly Mark Mays is who we've worked with locally here. He's done a great job. There's no cost, for us to get a permit in the right of way, which is really fantastic. I thought all states must be like that, and then I have a friend in Tennessee, and he said, "Oh no, he has to pay quite a bit to have access to the right of way." So that's great. I mean, Missouri is awesome in that regard.
MoDOT has improved. I'll just say that.
Maybe we're just new at it and haven't had the history of problems maybe a long time ago. I don't know, but yeah, they've worked well with us. We've even been able to place some utility poles in right of way to be able to serve wireless customers service, and that's really great. That's been very helpful. I think other companies are doing that too. Windstream, I think, is doing it. Not sure who else is doing it. Is AT&T doing something like that as well? I think.
As far, I mean, we place poles in the right of way all over the place.
Well, I mean for wireless.
But for wireless, as far as small cells go, yes, yeah. Cool. Here in Springfield, we do a lot of small cells, so yeah, I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
No problem. So yeah.
You spoke a little bit about taking fiber all the way into the home versus having it back at a module or whatever. What's sort of the driving motivation there, and what are maybe some of the lost speeds when you have it out at the module versus into your home?
Well, the motivation is to be completely future-proof. Fiber is the end game. I mean, once you have fiber to every house in this country, it's done. We don't gotta keep upgrading the system because fiber can do anything. It can do, it can do 1 gig, 10 gig, 40 gig, 400 gig. I mean, you can do almost anything with fiber. It's amazing. And that doesn't even take into account the future of what's going to happen with the electronics. Because the network, the physical glass, once it's in place, all you got to do to upgrade the speed is just replace the electronics on either end. And that's really not very expensive. I mean, for just a few $1,000s, you can upgrade the electronics to a lot more capacity. So that was the goal, is to be completely future-proof. And since we're building a brand new network, it would just make sense for us to run fiber all the way and not switch to something else. The physical fiber, the glass, is really not that expensive, especially for the drop part, the part going into the customer's house. It's like 30 cents a foot, It's just really not very expensive. Of course, you got labor to put it in and all that, So that's part of it, but so it's future-proofing, so we don't have to go back and upgrade it later. Speed-wise, because it's fiber, you can do, like I said, anything you want. If you're using copper to get into the house, well, then you're going to be limited on how much capacity you have. And I mean, there's all these different technologies and all these different ways to use copper. And it really depends on how far the cabinet is to the house if you're using copper. But you could easily get 100 meg on the copper line if the cabinet's really close to the house. So 100 meg's pretty good, but it's not. In the future, you're going to need even more than that. I mean, like I said, when I started, nobody was streaming anything. There was no Netflix. There was no YouTube. If you wanted to watch a streaming video, you had to go to this one website that my friends all liked. It was called jeffiscool.com. And that's where you went. And there was like 30 videos, and that was it. And you couldn't upload new videos, It was just fixed. You could watch whatever Jeff thought was cool, and that was it. Anyway, so nowadays everybody's streaming everything. My 12-year-old son sits there and plays Minecraft, and he has 2 screens, so he'll sit there and watch a YouTube video about how to code in Minecraft on one screen while he's coding over here and sort of playing Minecraft all at the same time. So anyway, there's a lot more of that going on. We had 13 devices connected to the internet in our house before we even moved into the house. So our garage doors, our water heaters, the doorbell, the shower even is connected to the internet. It's like,
yeah. I think that addresses all the questions that I had.
I was just going to ask one more question. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, probably just funding as far as like the future of. Do we know what the funding's going to look like that's coming from the federal government to the state and to the county even?
We had a
Some of us have a little better perspective than others. For now, the ARPA, we're looking at a little over 2.7 billion, is it 2.71? Real money. And told other folks that our ask at this moment is 250 million of that, right at 10% to go into the state broadband fund. And the reason for that is the track record. They're showing $7 return on investment, basically following capital for every dollar expended. So that would represent almost $2 billion, to the state. But the next round, 100 million-ish. Yeah, that's up in the air. They're literally debating that as we speak. So we're guardedly optimistic we'll get another round of that. Of course, we've got RDOF, NTIA, other funds. Actually, historically, black colleges, universities are going to be receiving some funding. I haven't. Do you have hard numbers yet? Sorry.
No, we do not that I feel comfortable.
So that would be Lincoln University in Jefferson City and Harris Stowe in St. Louis. So Kansas City doesn't have historically a black college university, so that wouldn't be going to that area. But St. Louis, that is going to be a game changer. I know our state broadband director's been all over that. Harris Stowe's been all over it. So we're really looking forward to that. So there's some really good developments coming down the road. And I do have one other. As far as census block methodology, what are you running into there?
You talking about the reporting or the maps? Yeah. The way that, of course, the FCC does the maps now with Form 477, it was never really intended to be used to decide funding and everything like we're using it for now. So we certainly do need a lot better maps so that we can determine where broadband's available and where it's not, so that we can fund things better. But I'm afraid that process is going to take a while. It could be a few more years before that really is available in a precise way to know exactly where, capacity is available or where internet's available, broadband's available, and where it's not. So unfortunately, I think for now, the best way to proceed is just to use what we have and go ahead and get the funding out there, whether it's loans, grants, some combination of the two, and then build the broadband, because otherwise it'll be another 10 years. We'll be back here in 10 years, talking about this again. Hey, there's still millions of people that don't have broadband.
No, we're not.
So, because the maps are, they're just not very good. Everybody knows that, but nobody has really quite figured out how to fix it yet.
Addressing that question, Mizzou has something out there called the Resource Rail, and they're actually doing the mapping now. So we have some really good GIS people in the state already working. Our plan is basically to find a way to take that from one and park it in the other. We're going to have to do something legislative to accomplish that. But also at the federal level, Senator Blunt's been instrumental. Missouri's one of the 2 pilot states using basically Google Earth technology, real time, and assessors records. So I actually was able to attend a demonstration out here. It's been a couple of years back. And a person operating the cursor in real time going over this farm, which was in west central Missouri somewhere, we don't know which county. Did circle the house. Well, they need internet. Circle the garage. They probably need it. Then circle the rectangular outbuilding. They hovered over it. Said, well, that's some sort of shed. They don't need it. And it's a true story. The person sitting next to my right said, that's my hog barn. Well, it wasn't her hog barn specifically, but it was a hog barn. So the person in upstate New York didn't know what a hog barn looked like from the air, dairy out there. The person sitting next to my right was Chris Chin, the Missouri Director of Agriculture, also a constituent from Shelby County. So they got up and sorted that out immediately. So even when we do have the resources in place, a little pilot error there, sometimes folks don't know what they're looking at. So that's, it's only as good as the people who operate it. So I hope they took care of that and did a little more recognition. This is what this looks like from the air. But that was, again, it was something encouraging, but it's like, oh, for crying out loud. Get somebody from Missouri who knows what they're looking at to operate this machinery.
Yeah.
So those are some of the encouraging things coming down the pike, that as a state, we're just not there yet as far as that being a statewide resource. So any light you could shed, any studies you've done, one-pagers, you name it, we can use this. Is that okay? We're just basically collecting evidence from everybody out there we can get our hands on to inform the reports, we can inform the committee, so we can inform the House. The Senate hopefully will be informed on a good day. Sorry, senators, but it's true. That's our little struggle, is we deal with our own little, internal bubbles. But I want to thank you for coming out and presenting. Thank you for being in 17 counties in Missouri. That's more than 10% of the state, and it's pushing 20%. But anything we can do at the statewide level, please send whatever you've got. My House account was lewis.riggs@house.mo.gov, or send it to Representative Davidson or Owen, and we will make sure that gets into the report. But we want to basically hear from everybody out there in this space. And the numbers, we write all this stuff down. We've got more numbers flying at us, and we know what to do with it. We're going to get a handle on this. And no, we're not going to be back here 10 years having this conversation, because we get one chance to do this right. It's 2022, so.
If we do it right, we won't be back in 10 years.
That's my goal, is we do this once and we're done.
Yeah. I really like the way that the Rural Utility Service puts out funding. So they let the applicant decide where the service is available or where it's needed, because, broadband is a local problem. You can't do like a statewide or a nationwide sort of plan. Every little local, almost like you were talking about, those hog farms and stuff. I've seen, people living in places like that, like I've got customers right now that are paying, $95 for a gig, and they, their house doesn't even look like a house. It looks like a hog farm or a hog shed, So anyway, it's really hard to tell from a map, where the service is needed. So anyway, RUS lets the applicant submit the application and say, here's where we think service is needed and where there's not currently good service. And then it's up to them to actually go out and verify the area. So they have field verifiers. They have a contractor even that's a field verifier. Goes out and drives the area, checks the lines, talks to people in the area to make sure that it's legit.
And that's one thing we've talked about. Basically, at the statewide level, we have a broadband office, but it's actually one person, so it's an officer. And basically doing exactly what you talked about, going out and verifying. We have a clawback provision we put in statute last year with the state funds. If you're not out there doing what you're supposed to within 3 years, give the money back. Yeah. And we need to be able to enforce that mechanism and make sure that our dollars are going exactly where they're supposed to, when they're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to hear, something from a practitioner who's been doing this for 15 years plus. You've seen a lot of changes in your lifetime. We'd like to be able to facilitate what you do and other providers to get out there and that real last mile access, which is sorely lacking. We've got to wrap our minds around that. So, again, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a few minutes left. Is there anyone in the Zoom room? I noticed a few additions, some folks who are new to the Zoom room that would like to testify for the town hall.
We're all bashful.
Yeah, quite.
For informational purposes only, there are no bills pending before this committee. We're interim.
This isn't even being publicly recorded or anything along those lines. Anyone in the room?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, Mike, get up here.
We'd love to have you.
About the end of time, that's probably good. That way I don't have to. Chairman Riggs, thanks for going around the state and doing these. And Representative Davidson, glad to meet you and
Nice to meet
face
you.
to face. And Representative Owen, I didn't go to school with you. I didn't grow up with you, but it seems like we've known each other
For a long time. Well, that's because I'm old.
Anyway, I'm Mike Haynes. I'm with AT&T. I'm based here in Springfield and cover Southwest Missouri as far as community and government relations go. But yeah, I don't have a lot to add. As you know, AT&T, we're firmly entrenched in Missouri. We have been for over a century.
Right now in our networks, both broadband networks and wireless networks, we've been investing about $900 million a year in those networks, year after year in Missouri. Nationwide, it's anywhere from $21 to $25 billion a year in our networks. We're the largest private company that capital investment in the nation. In Missouri, we're probably the largest, maybe Ameren with some of their later stuff. They might exceed our capital expenditures, but it's going to be pretty close. So just here in the Springfield area, we're doing about $30 million in investment year after year in those networks. So we've been building a lot of fiber. We've heard, a lot of fiber to the home. Travis and of course, has been doing a great job with their total high speed. He kind of gave you the history of how they've grown up from the fixed wireless provider into, and so it takes, I guess my point is it takes companies like his and ours, there's lots of different solutions on how we get to there. And so I think that's good to know. Right now, so as far as our wired broadband footprint, we're in parts of 22 states. So in those parts of 22 states, which includes Missouri, we're on a pretty aggressive build plan, fiber to the home right now. Coming into this year, we were probably about 14 million locations. We're adding 3 million this year, and next year 4 million, and probably keep on going after that. We have a big focus on more fiber to the home and fiber to the business too. Obviously when you're in more of a city setting, you have more businesses that you cross, but as you get more rural, it's more residential. You've talked about, access, adoption, then you talk about literacy, digital literacy. Why aren't people adopting it? Affordability, all those types of things, because if you build these very expensive networks and people don't buy them, then you don't have the income to build more of those networks. And you guys know that is an issue, especially when you have some places where, Travis was talking about, getting 90% in some places, but on average, it's more like 65 to 70%. So you have 35% people that have access to them that don't buy it for whatever reason. And so there's some things going on at the federal level for affordability. The Emergency Broadband Benefit Plan that's in place right now, the EBB plan, it was just a limited amount of money that's going to run out. But Sonia can probably say, so the current bill in the Senate on broadband, part of that broadband money, that $65 billion, is on affordability, on providing subsidies. I don't know what percentage it is or where it is right now, but let's say out of that $65 billion, maybe half of it is just going to be towards, say, a permanent EBB fund going forward, which is going to help with a lot of folks, I think, on that affordability and adoption thing. But we still have to see what happens as the Senate finishes up and it goes to the House as well. So, but any questions you have for me?
What impediments do you see at the statewide level for your deployment process?
Missouri is a good place for us to do business right now, and I believe that's been the case for a long time. We've had our legislature, you guys included, but your predecessors as well, have done a good job of removing a lot of roadblocks that other states still have in place, quite frankly. We've done a good job of establishing the rules of what are the state rules, what are the local government rules, and because those are where those roadblocks jump up. But I'd say right now, I think you still have to keep an eye on, and I keep on going back to Travis about it, but even the Sac Osage issue about, what about right-of-ways? What about easements? What about the cost of permits? Travis said, I can get a MoDOT right-of-way permit and it doesn't cost anything. But when I go from city to county or whatever, sometimes those are, now granted, we have statutes in Missouri that you can only recover the cost of managing your right-of-way through your permitting process. So that keeps them reasonable. But different counties, different cities go at it in a different way, and making sure that that permitting process is very fluid. And because, I mean, think about this, not too many years ago, the people in the right-of-way were just the local telephone company, the cable company, and then your electric company, along with any other water utilities and whatnot. Well, now you have a lot of other players in those right-of-ways, and they get crowded, and it gets more difficult. And we just have to make sure that, I guess from a state level, that we're keeping that open and productive. Because otherwise, you stop it right there. If I can't get a permit, and I've had cities that put ordinances in place that we just can't do business there because of what the barriers they put up.
And that was one of my follow-up questions as far as, legislatively enabling municipalities to form broadband districts. Is that something folks have an appetite for that, and that we're trying to basically get all hands on deck?
Yeah, and you guys talked about that earlier, and I know you had some questions because it came out with Commissioner Dixon talked about, states prohibiting. Well, we don't have that in Missouri. Cities and counties can do their own broadband networks if they want to. I mean, we have some concerns about how that is, using taxpayer dollars to undercut, private companies. But with that said, last year, the legislature said that, okay, NIDs and CIDs can now form these. You can use your NID and CID money for broadband. I think that got through, past the governor's desk, didn't it? And then, this thing about, cities banding together to do, but I think where you're going to be most successful is this public-private partnership thing. I think that's where you get to see some interesting things. I mean, think about what City Utilities is doing here with SpringNet. And when Jeff Bertholdi was on earlier and described how that is working, I mean, that's an example of what I'm talking about, where, they have a lot of expertise, which is different from a lot of cities and counties, but SpringNet does. And they're using that expertise to build the network and then partnering with a company like CenturyLink, except now they're Lumen, right?
This week.
I've been around a long time, so I've seen their name change even more than my companies. But no, those are the type of things that are going to be most successful, because you get the players that really understand what it is to run these networks and to sell these networks and to do those things, and you get that ability, I think. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the AT&T official position, but I think that's
Close enough for government work.
yeah.
And then my last question is, any questions you have of us?
No, I mean, thanks for doing this. It's good. We got to talk about this stuff and then look for solutions. So.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, it's now noon.
That's fine. Is there any about folks zooming?
Make sure that there's no. Are there any questions remaining in the Zoom room? No testimony, but any questions that you'd like to ask? I see no movement on the mute button. So, thank you all. That concludes today's town hall. There will be a town hall again tomorrow in Ava, as I understand it. Yes. And Chairman Riggs will continue his tour of the state to.
That'll be Travis Smith, so y'all get your caffeine and Travis is primed.
Yep. So thank you for logging on, those in the Zoom room. As you're logging out, thanks for coming. And of course, everyone in the room, thank you for coming as well. And those who left the room earlier or left our Zoom room, we appreciate all the information. I'll be sending out an email to anyone who did testify, basically asking for any sort of data or information that you'd like to be put in the report. All information is relevant, even these little flyers that we just got from you, Travis. Anything at all, we'll put in that report. So, thank you so much.
Can you confirm that tomorrow's at 9:30?
Yes.
Is it tomorrow at 9:30 with Travis?
Yes, 9:30.
Thank you.
Sonia?